Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Heavy Metallurgy, number 133. This time we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about our lives and our journey, how we got here, and open up about our feelings, and talk about what makes us tick. And we're just going to get to the bottom of who we are and why we are here, and it's going to be great, everybody. I'm glad. Hi, I'm Marty. I'm a collector scum. Nice to meet you. Probably no, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't drink that much. Anyway, you sir?
I'm just here to talk about heavy metal albums. I don't know where you're going with this.
Oh. Maybe I'm in the wrong chat. Maybe I'm in the wrong channel today. I don't know.
Maybe so. The Bronies Anonymous doesn't start for another hour. They're still on daylight savings time. They're in one of those states that doesn't fall back. So sorry, but
anyway, we're here and it's good to see everybody.
Indeed.
Awesome. How you doing, Alan?
I am doing pretty good. It was a busy day, busy week. Yeah, it's that time of this year, though. We're getting into the holiday stuff and also trying to wrap a lot of loose ends up as we get to the year's end. But looking forward to this. We've had some fun this week leading up to this. Our guest has made some promos, and we've had some guest appearances on other Heavy Metallurgy streams this week in preparation. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a fun conversation. Hello to everybody in the chat. Hope folks have had a good week. I know a lot of folks have been kind of interested and excited to see what we cover tonight. And frankly, I am too.
And let's bring the guy out that kind of spearheaded this whole thing. And just the fact that seeing this guy squirm as he was called out by Bulk Rogan. I mean, let's get him in here. I don't know what was better, the Bulk Rogan performance or the look of, what is happening on Kellen's face? It was
Here's my album club co-host just leading me to the slaughter. And I get absolutely caught off guard. No, it was the Bulk Rogan appearance was probably the best thing that happened on the internet this week. And Alan did an amazing job. So if anyone has not seen wants to hear us talk about Ball Thrower, check out the album club this week. But my God, the Bulk Rogan
cameo.
I mean, like, it was a tag team. He came in completely unannounced, stole the show.
He was announced, just not all people. You and Jim had no clue. Jim was just like, what is happening right now? It's so funny.
Yeah, Jim was kind of the innocent bystander, called him the cameo drive-by.
He was the innocent bystander. Please, I was in the middle, I was so ready to talk about my new records and all.
Oh no, you weren't innocent at all. You were the intended target / victim. So no.
Oh,
the
so
crosshairs were right there on you. And I gotta say, that was like, you're watching it after the fact. That was the hilarious part. Your reaction was priceless. Just because
it was awesome.
It was the perfect combination of, you're like, I can't believe this is happening to me, and I love it at the same time. With the expression was perfectly balanced between those two things of, I'm getting owned, but this is glorious. You can see both halves of that playing out on your face.
TJ said the only thing that was missing from that was the Mean Gene Okerlund coming into interview for the Kellen's reaction. I said, we got it. It was stupefied. He was just like, afterwards, what just happened?
Yes. And Alan definitely needed like a giant belt to hold as well.
I thought of the idea at 8:10 and you were going live at 9 o'clock. So I did not have a lot of time to work out the finer details. With more advanced notice, yes, we could have gotten a few more props in there for sure.
Kellen is a promo master, everyone. Mike, thank you for your compliment to Kellen. He cheers to you, sir. You nailed it again. Yep.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Very cool. But
so that's in the past. So now it's time to move back to the present so we can talk about stuff from the past, mostly, except the stuff we're going to talk about that's new.
Yeah,
correct. That wasn't awkward.
So why are we here, gentlemen? This has been a lot of leading up and ball busting to get here, and we're here. And Kellen, what's the sit rep?
So this all started, if you caught my promos back in 2022, Alan had talked about in one of his videos and did an incredibly good job trying to sort of discern what this whole conversation surrounding new wave of traditional heavy metal actually is, what it sounds like, is a sort of a brief overview trying to condense essentially 20 years of traditional heavy metal sort of records appearing, what it's culminated in. And I saw the video. It also spurred some conversation on heavy metallurgy and responded in kind. Thank you, Larry, for sure. There essentially, Alan decided he wanted to respond. We had some different sort of opinions on bands, the sound, genre, etc. So before actually just trading videos back and forth, I brought it, to Alan and Marty to see if they'd be down for one night on heavy metallurgy. Let's just have this conversation live, and talk about the things that we disagree on, records that sort of are a part of the movement, and whether we believe they should actually be considered to be traditional heavy metal, where they fall, and kind of work it out in front of all you good people. So we have a selection tonight of 15 records total. We each picked 5.
I did not pull. I only have a couple of mine list. Did you guys pull?
I have some of them. So if you need me to grab something on your list,
I didn't grab anything. I can while someone's talking. I'll grab what I need.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yes, Ryan, I will hook you up with the shirt. Depending, let's see if
Hulk, at least he's not asking for your panties.
If the Hulk doesn't destroy me so severely that I end up shirtless by the end of the night, we'll see how this goes. But
Kellen's going to totally Hulk out and like stand up and like rip the shirt open, so there won't be anything left to send you.
I did promise Mel that I would keep my clothes on this time around. So
you did, and she's going to hold you to that.
TJ is somewhere flipping a table over in Benzie County right now. What? How dare she?
But going into this, sort of the parameters, we had met beforehand and kind of set some ground rules as to what we would what would essentially qualify records for this list. So part of it was they had to be at least from 2005 after. Just we kind of threw that out as a general rule. For people who may be curious, this movement, if you want to call it that, has been around that long. I think the majority of the bands and the conversation surrounding them has really been generated in the past, I'd even say less than a decade, maybe 2015, 2016. But it's actually been going on for much longer than that. And but that was sort of a hard date that we set down. So a time period that we had to pull from, and then from there would use that to sort of govern what time period these records would be coming from. So things that we disagreed on, I'm going to jump into this. Obviously, traditional heavy metal never went anywhere. So for anyone who's watching this, who's potentially confused or offended because what that means to you never died, I totally understand where you're coming from. But we at least agreed that there has been something brewing for a while now, at least to cause people to be offended, caught off guard, wondering what's happening with all these new bands that are playing in this style right now.
It's a pretty insulated. I mean, they're not really getting big. They're kind of, preaching to the choir. They're kind of the impression I get outside looking in, because I do not have a lot from this genre. I don't. Do I hate it? No. I think the title is unnecessary, but it just doesn't seem to be, bands like Riot City kind of took off, but did they take off? I mean, what does take off mean nowadays? What does take off mean anymore? People are hot on a band for a month, and then it's like on to the next shiny thing. Ooh, shiny.
I do think it's something that is, relatively underground, if you want to use that phrase, but we're here talking, on about death metal and black metal, et cetera, all the time. And I think the fact that we're sort of sharing certain records, there's it speaks to a certain kind of metalhead right now that is primarily listening to mostly underground stuff. So the first thing I kind of wanted to highlight that I brought out in my video is the reason I think it's important to like contextualize this as a place in history are things that like labels that started to emerge in the 21st century around this time period. So No Remorse comes out, I think, in the Greek label comes out in 98. Cruz del Sur, I Hate Records, High Roller. Keep It True is a metal festival that's in Germany that started in 2003.
Yep.
That's also really important for sort of crafting bands that sort of generated some movement and bringing even older bands back to the forefront for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That'll be a part of our conversation this evening. But I would also say, like, for me personally, this is an anecdotal perception. I came from a time period where extreme metal, I think, was very much where you started with. I did not have the traditional sort of progression. So if you came from listening to, American power metal or glam metal or new wave of British heavy metal in the 80s, and you got progressively heavier thrash, death, etc., through the 90s, I didn't have that. And I think a lot of the bands, the mostly younger artists who are playing in this style share a similar kind of generational perspective. Where they were exposed to a lot of extreme metal and then developed, like, we're missing a certain kind of sound right now. And there was greater interest once extremes had become exhausted. For me as a listener, I felt that way. And I think that you saw this gain momentum from the mid 2000s up to where it is today, probably speaks volumes to how much more metal fans became interested in the sound that throughout the 90s, while it never went away, it was not at its height. I think at least we can agree that. Things like American power metal, epic heavy metal, did not, let's just say it's not there, kind of a dark time for those genres.
Well, I mean, even like epic heavy metal, I mean, even though like bands like Manila Road finally got their due at the end, still not huge. It's still not at the forefront of there's still a bunch of people you say Manila Road, they're like, who? They never heard of it. It's still, right. It still has it's slightly above underground status. Yeah,
for sure. And and it took time, so that's kind of where I wanted to begin with, because that generational perspective for me is important when we talk about the influences that are going into these so-called traditional genres. I think for a lot of the bands, genre sort of limitations, as tedious as they may be, they also aren't static. They shift over time. And for someone like myself, listening to, for example, first wave black metal, that's going to come up tonight in discussion. And I think in the 21st century, what black metal was for many people, the lines shifted. So when we heard Venom and Merciful Fate, for the first time, it was kind of a different sort of parameters. We listened to it with different kind of ears, and we heard a very different kind of music. And I think that's why you see it sort of pouring into bands that we're going to talk about this evening. And it's just one example to drive home that I think where the most creative, or a lot of the best work that's coming out that we tonight will debate as to whether it qualifies for being a traditional heavy metal act, speaks to how those lines have shifted and how new artists are sort of working within those boundaries, working within those margins. And there would probably be some disagreement tonight, I'm sure there will be, but I think that's important to contextualize, because one of the issues that I took exception to was, if you think that the only thing that makes up traditional heavy metal is Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Accept, it's going to be very easy to pigeonhole and marginalize bands who are just making genre records. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There are newer bands who play, like Alan and I really liked the Fortress EP. It's one that we're very high on, but that is 100% like you hear Maiden in 1983, 84 on that record for me. There are Ambush is a band out of Sweden that's very much playing in like a Euro kind of accept style. I love it. Screaming for Vengeance. Those records are super iconic. But if you only think that that is what traditional heavy metal is and anything outside of those boundaries, of course, you're going to be bored of it. Of course, fans are going to look back and say, you have nothing new to offer. This is, sad remakes of classic records that happened 40 years ago. And why I wanted to bring that up was I think this movement is much larger than that incredibly narrow lens. And so maybe that is my sort of perception of what traditional heavy metal is, thus the debate this evening.
And I got to say also here, I mean, obviously we're going to be, splitting some hairs, drawing some lines, busting some balls tonight. And ultimately, genres, it's a point of communication. It's how you explain to somebody what something sounds like. You say, okay, this is black metal. Instantly, if a person listens to metal, they start formulating a hypothesis in their mind what the band could sound like. You say traditional heavy metal. If you you mentioned, if you only classify Judas Priest as that, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, but that is, for somebody like myself and Alan, who've been around a little bit longer, been sitting with some of this stuff for so long, we don't really think about it anymore. It just kind of is what it is. So you hear something, you're not really like, well, how does this fit in what genre? It's just kind of, it is or it isn't. And ultimately I try to classify things in metal. I call it metal or epic metal, or, we're going to be talking to try to, force some of these bands into some certain pigeonholes, which, fair or not fair, ultimately it doesn't matter. If you enjoy the music, I don't care. If I like something, I don't care what it is. I listen to all kinds of music, but just so people don't get all like, well, this isn't the law. This is three people's opinions. And of course, all you fine folks in the chat as well. We're just gonna have a good, fun conversation tonight, and some varied opinions, I'm sure. Anyway, Alan, I didn't mean to cut in there. Did you have something you wanted to add to this?
Oh, no, you're fine, Marty. Yeah, some things, I guess, to follow up there with, like you said, Marty, this does get into, genres and genre tags. It's a topic that some people can get very tired of. It can be a headache trying to keep it all straight. Absolutely, I agree with that. But you made a very good point there, Marty, that genres, for all the, back and forth, that they create, they do serve an important purpose. They facilitate communication and organization. Heavy metal, there are now, tens of thousands of bands, that have been called heavy metal over the past 50 years, hundreds of thousands of albums. You can't just call them heavy metal and have that be meaningful to people anymore.
Yeah.
If this were 1971 and we're, hanging out here and I'm like, hey, Kellen, you got to check out, this, new band, they're heavy metal. Kellen would have a very good feel immediately of what I meant, what that band sounds like.
Was 71 heavy metal even a topic at that point?
It was. Yes, it was.
Okay.
But it was a very small topic. That's kind of the thing. At that point, if I had told Kellen, hey, check out, this Bang record, it's kind of this new heavy metal band, Kellen, if he was, into heavy metal, would pretty quickly know that I'm talking about something that falls along the lines of, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, in that, very small kind of, circle of bands somewhere. If I do that today, like, hey, Kellen, by the way, have you checked out, this new band, Raging Winter's Darkness? Have you heard of them, Kellen?
No, I have not.
You should check them out. They're a very good heavy metal band.
Okay.
So Kellen's kind of hesitant. It's like, what does that mean? But, Kellen's
right.
like, what kind of heavy metal band is the question, it kind of begs. Because today that could mean the band sounds like anything from Black Sabbath to Dark Throne to Spirit Box to Obituary to Candlemass to Riot City to anything in between. It's not a descriptive term anymore beyond, it just, barely even gets you, in the right time zone. So, that's where you do have to have genres. If I tell Kellen, hey, this is a Cascadian black metal band that I'm recommending, then Kellen right away kind of, understands. I can use those few words to communicate the idea to Kellen or anybody else. And then Kellen can start to organize that band alongside things that will probably be similar so that he can then kind of judge. All right, is that something that might interest me? Kind of lets me know what to expect if I want to spend time or money going and checking that out. So they do serve a purpose, is the thing I want to establish there. I know people get sick of them. I know, yes, sometimes it gets kind of silly how many, sub genres we
It's getting worse and worse every day.
Worse and worse because the number of bands keep
evolving
more and more and more.
Evolve.
Absolutely. And that's something too that comes up. It gets complicated because bands can combine influences in different ways. And so, you can't just like, this band is, 40% Doom and, 50%, not Doom, and then come up with a tag. We see, especially, in this day and age, bands pull a lot of influences from all different styles of metal and other styles of music and sort of blend them together so that, it can be very difficult to put them in existing categories. And so things kind of splinter out because, again, you're trying to come up with some descriptor that's going to mean something to other people so that you can communicate to them efficiently.
This is a big point here, Mike. Good one. For anyone who grew up in the original traditional metal of the 80s, it's part of their DNA. That can be a big hurdle. It's true.
100%. It can. And that kind of goes back, to Kellen's point. And it's something that's occurred to me this week, kind of, thinking back over, what Kellen and I had talked about in the past. And what, Kellen just mentioned about, if you only limit traditional heavy metal, in a certain way, if you're trying to define traditional heavy metal as meaning, this plus this, and you're kind of done, you can do that. I think what kind of throws a little bit of a wrench here, it depends on how you use the word traditional. And this is going to be very semantic, but I think it's actually an important point. And it comes up in other music styles as well. If you're just saying, if we're talking about like all metal that came out back in the day, all the stuff, released from 1980 to 1985, it's traditional just in the sense that it's kind of old. It's kind of, where the sound began. It's lowercase t traditional. It's just a descriptor of kind of, old schoolness. On the other hand, you could also use the word traditional as a genre itself to describe things like what I just showed on screen. People use capital T traditional as a way to refer to the sound that you get with Iron Maiden, Accept, Priest. Those are kind of the core three because everybody knows them. Everyone understands what that is. There would be plenty of other bands that fall in those ranges too. One more obscure one I like to pick to throw in there is Picture. Comes out around that same time, is going for that same kind of sound. It's just one of the hordes of smaller bands that did it. So I think that's one point that gets lost when people sort of, have these differences of opinion. When we're talking about the new wave of traditional heavy metal, do we want to just say, well, it's just the new wave of any band that chose to sound anything like any band that came out, during the decade of the 1980s? Okay, that's lowercase traditional. Or are we trying to say there's this new wave of bands that are very, very much trying to emulate very, tightly the sound of those kind of, core early 80s classics? You could put Merciful Fate into that group with Priest and Maiden and Accept too, and I think you're okay there. And, in that case, you are referring to, a very specific style, aka genre of heavy metal. This isn't speed metal. These aren't thrash bands. These are not new wave of British heavy metal bands. They're not doom bands. They have certain sonic properties that link them together, and it becomes a genre. It's a little weird because, yes, 40 years ago, we didn't call Iron Maiden traditional heavy metal. We didn't call it except traditional heavy metal. It was brand new. It was the new shiny thing. It was the metal of the future today. Genres often get applied retroactively. You don't really come up with the term until long after the thing has already started. One other little point to make here, and then I'll throw it back over to y'all. Another thing that happens with this kind of thing in terms of like, are we trying to narrow it down very tightly, like in a narrow definition, or are we wanting to allow the term to kind of balloon out and include more? It's actually something that comes up in lots of classification schemes. This isn't unique to like music genres or metal genres at all. It's an issue in biological classification. Biologists, zoologists, paleontologists have this same tension between, do you kind of lump, it's the debate is usually referred to as lumping versus splitting.
This is the whole argument. Did dinosaurs have feathers?
Well, it's not the feathers, but you're on the right track, Marty. It's the matter of, you have found, like, you know, a fossil critter. You're cleaning it off, you're examining it, and you're trying to decide, okay, which species is this? Some people, you know, are in the mentality that pretty much every specimen should, if at all possible, be lumped into an existing species. It's like, this is pretty close to a Tyrannosaurus. Just call it a Tyrannosaurus. There is no need to come up with a new name for it unless it is obviously hugely different. You're exactly right, Kelty. That's exactly what I'm doing. On the other hand, there are other people with the opposite mindset. They'll look at that same specimen and they'll say, you can't call that a Tyrannosaurus because, look, it's got an extra bump on this bone right here. And this bone over here meets at a slightly different angle compared to the jaw. You know, there's these little differences. And so, no, that's not a Tyrannosaurus. That is something different. We split that out into a different taxon, or in the case of, you know, a band, a different genre. One isn't right and one isn't wrong. It's just different ways of perceiving the problem. And it kind of comes back to what Kellen mentioned with, you know, sort of the boundaries, you know, in terms of zoology or paleontology. How much variation do you allow in a species before you just have to say, okay, I'm sorry, that critter right there, that one is too different to still shoehorn it into the Tyrannosaurus group, and you got to put it somewhere else. The same thing then comes up with bands. You know, how different can a band sound and still get away with being called traditional metal? Some people are going to lump a whole bunch of bands under that umbrella. And other people are really going to want to split them out and be like, nope, this doesn't have, it's missing this thing, or they've got this extra component to them. Got to split that out into something else. So those are some of sort of the, you know, challenges, I think, when it comes to talking about this. So yes, if I refer to like lowercase t and uppercase t some tonight, I'm trying to make that distinction that, you know, there is a difference between just saying a bunch of old traditional sounding bands and trying to say there is a genre of traditional metal where bands that sound a particular way and have a particular style to them.
I do want to add, getting back to Kellen's point about, you know, if you're just wanting, you know, screaming for vengeance is your template, you're going to be disappointed. I don't know, because really I'm no scholar when it comes to this subgenre of metal. And when I see, you know, like Riot City, I don't own any Riot City yet. People tell me they're great. I look at their album covers, and a lot of bands from this subgenre are making album covers that look like they came from the 80s. You got the, you know, the tiger with the stuff coming out of its eyes. It looks like a Judas Priest cover. And a lot of these, I mean, they're trying to emulate their heroes. So that is very much a thing. So for me, in my mind, it's very easy to get to what this sound should be because it's what they're showing me. It's what they're giving me. It's like, hey, quiet DNA in Marty's body. It gets woken up and excited when it sees something that looks like a Judas Priest record or whatever. So I think, I mean, some of these bands that, you know, that were picked, I think we're really going to be stretching to call it new wave of traditional heavy metal because there's only a handful, I think, that could fit into the scope. but even them, they're trying to, I think it's a little more adventurous than what I think the glut of the new wave traditional heavy metal is emulating. They're trying to be old. They want to be priests. They want to be, these others mixed with a little bit of speed metal maybe. And I don't know. I've got off my topic, but I mean, they're actually trying to appeal to the old school with the way they look, the way they dress, the way their covers look, the style of guitars, the tuning. I mean, I've only heard a very small window of this stuff, so my palette isn't full. I don't have a huge bunch of education to pick from here, but I kind of get what they're doing, and it's not anything secret or overly expansive. They're not trying to move the ball forward. I don't think they're just emulating it, which is cool. It's fine. Anyway, sorry.
Yep. No, that's a good point. If you'll blow me up for a second,
yep,
Marty, just some examples of what you're referring to. I've got a stack of them here. I showed you this one before. This is very much the aesthetic that a lot of these bands that are kind of associated with this style tend to go for. They're going for that big flashy metallic looking logo, but relatively simple artwork. You have Travelers, you have Thunder Slaves, you've got Sabers.
They all look like old from the 80s.
Yep. Most of them, have a very throwback, and even the ones that maybe
look
the art
like
styles,
Sarathungal, all of it.
This is a Michael Whalen artwork. It's makes you right away want to think of Sarathungal kind of stuff. You've got Sumerlands. These bands really do want to play off of those aesthetics from the early and mid 80s heavy metal scene. Kellen mentioned the Fortress EP earlier. I didn't pull that one off the shelf tonight. I remember the first time I heard and saw that band, listening to them and looking at them, I was genuinely confused. I'm like, is this some old release from Mausoleum that I've just never heard of?
Right.
Or is this a new band? Yeah, and I had to go look them up on Metal Archives and be like, Fortress, not that Fortress, not that Fortress. This one. Oh, okay, there it is. No, it's actually a new thing. I honestly didn't know until I checked because of the way they sounded and the way the album cover was built. It very easily could have been something on a label like, Axe Killer or, Mausoleum from that same time period.
Kellen's been sitting quiet, stewing. What do you have to say?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is I'm thinking about that time period in the early 80s, and I think there's fundamentally a desire for the size, whether it's undercase or capitalized T, not to matter. Because when we look back at early heavy metal compilations from the beginning, 1984, 1983, they're incredibly diverse. And I think that is more or less the desire for these younger bands to not have to deal with how many bones are in their spine. It's, I mean, there is a fundamental, I understand the desire for categorization there. But there was a little bit more of an open-mindedness at a point in time because all these major genre-defining, sub-genre-defining records hadn't been, written yet. And I think for younger fans, myself included, I personally feel a bit more akin to a desire to group a lot of that era in together. Do they deserve their own genre definition? For sure. But and you will see it tonight, I will, in the same world, whether small t or little t, I will be grouping in the bands we just mentioned here, your Accept, etc. But epic heavy metal, American power metal, speed metal, and doom. All of those for me sit in the same sort of community in terms of influences, people who are listening to them, and what makes up this community.
That's the lowercase t.
Yes. So for his point is that, but I do think for people who are potentially trying to limit what younger bands who are grouped into this scene, if you want to call it that, it's that broad, and it's equally complicated once you get to talk about how they're pulling from different subgenres, and we'll kind of get into that later. But I just wanted to point out, like, there was a time period when people weren't so hung up on these kind of genre tags. And I really do think there's a part of like the community that is exhausted, with trying to worry about that, specifically when this era appears, and sort of reinterpreting, something that potentially was going on at that time in a new way, for a new audience. So I'll just close, and that'll be my last point I have to make on this conversation.
Keep in mind, though, Alan's, though his bone analogy is very astute, and I get what he's saying, he is also trying to compare actual science to art and culture. So there's a slight difference. A slight difference. There's a lot of passion, and of course, passion in the way people perceive things in music could also be the same way when it comes to science, when it comes to identifying dinosaur bones, where people have, well, this is the way it's supposed to be, and we find something that challenges that. It's not right. It's something, that throws everybody into it. I get it. So actually, your point is actually very astute. Never mind.
And well, I do agree, Alan, in the sense that like those subgenres, to your point, exist for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could go down that road, and that's why you get very specific sort of categories. I just do think part of the appeal, at least, is to try and look back at during a time how explosively creative the 1980s were, and how everything was happening so fast, and so fans were consuming the content simultaneously. And I do think that's kind of what's happening, at least for me personally, with this kind of world. So I do think there's a little bit of a shared narrative there.
Okay. Does Bulk Rogan, is he back there somewhere? Did he have anything to come and say, or no?
Not much. I mean, Kellen's example, he's right. It's changed over time for sure. And yes, I know a lot of people get tired of it. I get tired of it as well. Absolutely. But Kellen's example there, also sort of proves the point. If you're going to take a bunch of stuff, like if you were to take Accept and Iron Maiden and also lump them in with the Candlemasses and the Manowars and the Troubles and the Venoms, well, then if I name one of those bands to somebody who's never heard of them, and they're like, oh, what do they sound like? They're traditional heavy metal. Those bands don't sound that much alike. They're going to, if that person is thinking, so you're telling me I should check out Trouble, they sound like Judas Priest then? No. They sound like Accept then? No. They sound like Manowar then? No. That's where the genre thing eventually had to happen, because in the early 80s, you didn't need them. Every band, there was a lot fewer bands. Everybody maybe had their sort of own sound, and you just lumped them together, and it worked. But we're way past the point where that is going to effectively communicate things to people when they're looking for recommendations. It's one of the big things that metalheads love to do. We love to help each other find new bands and new albums.
Sharing passion.
We got to make recommendations to people that we think they'll like. There's no point in me recommending something to Marty that I don't think he'll like. If I mention a band, he's like, well, what does it sound like? I can't just say traditional heavy metal anymore. It would be meaningless. Once upon a time that tag worked, but if when you're doing the lowercase t thing, that doesn't work as a description anymore. There's just too many bands out there. There were too many bands looking back. Even if we want to say it's like, okay, lowercase traditional means just the stuff from the 80s. That could be anything between Poison and Creator. It's too wide a term for anybody to get much meaning out of it now when they're trying to understand what a band sounds like.
Sorry. Right on. Okay. Well, Kellen, why don't you start us off on this journey here?
Sure. Okay. So first record I pulled. This is the debut full length by Lucifer. So this is a doom band, but the reason I pulled them in specifically is they're sort of appealing towards, I would say, an older version of what the genre means. So specifically like end of early 80s, end of the 70s kind of doom. But what I thought was important about it is on Rise Above Records. So it's a Cathedral, connection. Guitars from Cathedral separates.
Yep, Lee Dorian's label.
It is funny because I wrote on here Cathedral because there's some sound in the riffs that reminded me of Cathedral big time.
Yeah. So why I thought that was important is it's like a distinguishing sort of characteristic. Cathedral for me would not qualify, right? That is something to me that is too much of like a doom that is really developed later in the 90s. That I don't hear a lot of. Like, I would not necessarily recommend that as a traditional heavy metal release. So and in this part, I would probably agree to some degree with Alan here. Like, we should parse them. However, this one has enough roots in an earlier style of the genre for me that I do think it's important. And the fact that you move essentially back in time from a Cathedral on a label that's associated with the band to something that's a bit more older in its influences, I think is important, right? His record was released in 2015. And there's enough going on here that separates it from the band that sort of spawned it. I think that sort of evolution towards something older is also something that you should look for in this conversation. Something that's looking past essentially how a genre evolved and then chose to go backwards in time.
Alan?
I'm sorry. So, Kellen, what are you kind of? So you're putting Lucifer in the new wave of traditional heavy metal category, or you were because you were kind of mentioning like you might want to separate it out. I wasn't clear there.
The Cathedral, I would not. So it's what spawned it. I wouldn't say Cathedral deserves, but this band does. This record does, more specifically.
Okay. Yeah. Lucifer, this was a good example for you to pick because there are a lot of bands that, do this same kind of style where, they're not trying to sound, like Maiden and Priest. They're trying to sound like something a little further back on the timeline than that. It's got, that, more of a 70s flavor to it in terms of hard rock, a lot of, the kind of the, occult overtones and the lyrics and stuff. Even the font and such, screams 70s band a lot more than, the sharper, brighter, shinier kind of logos you would experience from, an 80s band. And I always have a hard time knowing, what am I supposed to call these bands in terms of describing them? I can compare them to other bands for people, but I've never found a tag that I like that seems to, describe this bunch. For me personally, I wouldn't consider this new wave of traditional heavy metal. And the reasons being, whether it's, it doesn't really fit the lowercase t or the uppercase t for me. It certainly doesn't have, it's not playing on the, Priest except Maiden kind of sound. So I wouldn't want to, compare it to those bands directly. But everything we typically consider as traditional metal is more like everything you mentioned earlier, Kellen. It was all 80s material. It was you had Candlemass, and Trouble and stuff like that included in the list. Merciful Fate, sure, absolutely, that's fine. But this sounds like a generation before that. This is where it gets messy too. There was a lot of stuff in the 70s that was called heavy metal at the time. Like Marty, you asked earlier, was 71, was heavy metal really a thing? Yeah. If you go
Sabbath,
back and look at Sabbath, Deep Purple, Blue Oyster Cult, Led Zeppelin, Bang, Sir Lord Baltimore, TNS, the list goes on. And it was referred to popularly in reviews and magazines as heavy metal. But after a certain time, passed and we got, into the new wave of British heavy metal, we kind of rewrote the dictionary a bit. All of a sudden, you had a new wave of kids who didn't want to sound like those bands. They had listened to them. They liked them. They had been inspired by them, but they didn't want to sound exactly like them. They did what every generation of teenagers did. They try to rebel and do their own thing. They want to separate themselves from the previous generation. And so heavy metal became something very different. It became, faster. It became louder. It became more aggressive. it lost all those, long solos and, the kind of, it lost a lot of the, bluesy elements along the way and stuff. Lucifer, for me, fits with that group of 70s heavy metal bands. I don't have a great term for that other than to just say, yeah, I'd put it, closer to the 70s metal vibe than what I've been defining tonight as, either the, traditional metal of the 80s or the traditional capital T metal of, the priests and the maidens and accept. I kind of like this style. To be clear, this is nothing against the band. I listen to a lot of these bands. They're all, tend to be pretty good. I tend to take them in small doses. Once if I play like the Lucifer album a couple of times, like, okay, I've got a good feel for this. It doesn't beg me to play it over and over, again and again. But I do like the style. Lucifer did it pretty well. Trivia bit here on the band, if folks aren't familiar with it, Nicky Anderson was involved in this band later. He's not on this album.
And her and Joanna got married. Him and Joanna ended up getting married.
Yeah. So he was working with the band at a later point, because they're still active to my knowledge. So yeah, not new wave of traditional heavy metal the way we're talking about it tonight for me. I think it actually kind of goes back to, is there like a new wave of 70s retro metal? God, I'd hate to use that as a handle, but that's where this kind of band falls for me. They actually the sound they're emulating predates all the stuff we wouldn't call traditional heavy metal by modern standards. So, Marty, what did you think of Lucifer?
You and I are on the same page here. This is the first time I've heard this band. And people are asking in the chat, what is this? What is this? What is this? Well, it's basically rock based in the riffs and the songwriting. The vocalist of Joanna, she's got a clean style. She's a very good singer. There's a very minor metal weight in the songs and riff work. The guitars, the sound, and the playing style, there's a minor Cathedral and Sabbath influence. I hear a little more Cathedral than Sabbath, although Cathedral's influenced by Sabbath, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to mix like Cathedral with Coven, with Jinx, it's Joanna, she's kind of modeled her look after it too, with the black leather cat suit and the long blonde hair. It's very much a nod, a stylistic, aesthetic nod to Coven. In fact, I think they're on tour together right now. This to me is not new wave of traditional heavy metal. This is just, it's a cult rock with a slight metal underbass. I listen to this and I'm like, why don't I like it. If someone was playing it in the car, I wouldn't care, but I just doesn't resonate with me. I don't know what it is. I don't care. It sounds very much like a band that belongs on Rise Above. I mean, it's perfect. And I see why people like this. It's good. It's good. It's just not for me. So yeah, it's more a cult rock for me than new wave of traditional heavy metal. I don't know. I would have a real hard time or feel good about putting it in that classification.
Yeah. And yeah, Ryan, I agree with that too. Some of these bands of this style, they do sound better live than on record sometimes. I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, they can be very fun to see live. And then when I hear them on albums, sometimes it feels like it's a little bit bland. I'm not saying that about Lucifer. I've not seen Lucifer live, but I get where you're coming from there, Ryan.
All right. Do you have anything to add to this, Kellen? Or we move on?
No, I mean, I don't have anything to add there. I mean, I do find though, this will come up a couple of times this evening as to how the late 70s are thought of as to whether they deserve to be considered metal in general. So that we'll keep that on the board. So I
mean, is it metal the way metal is now? No. I mean, obviously it's more influenced by hard rock than it is a bunch of kids being influenced by Priest, and it's not the same. It's not the same metal. It's evolved.
For sure. I totally see both. I mean, one, I know like in terms of how much you're into this sound, as being, I'm talking about Marty specifically, like how much you consider this to be metal, period. And then that'll come out a couple times tonight. And I know, Alan, you're a big fan of this style in general. So I see where you're coming from. For me, discovering like this time period, is something that I early on I brought up sort of a narrative experience, right? So bands that I'm constantly consuming simultaneously, and I once again, like, that may be anecdotal to your, for you to consider, but I do think that's important when we're talking about in this time period, that there's a desire, at least for the fan base, to have a sort of shared 1980s experience. So if you have something like, Trouble or Pentagram, that in a lot of ways sound very 70s.
Early Pentagram was 70s.
Yeah.
And Trouble actually got more 70s as they went.
So, yep. But, we're talking, mid 80s here, early 80s, mid 80s. So when I go back and I listen to those Pentagram records and I think about, other bands that are appearing at this time, I put on Lucifer and I put on whatever, another band that you would pull from with the capital T. And they go into the same, for me, it's a part of that experience as they go into the same world, as I'm trying to traverse something that you experienced, in real time. That is my like desire for a shared metal sound.
Sure.
So once again,
playing catch up's a bitch. I mean, even at 52 years old, there's so many bands I missed, and it's like exciting to look and try to find those bands. Anyway.
So yeah, I think kind of to drive home the point, like, that's something I will always kind of have at the ready during the course of our conversation.
Right.
And with probably a difference in terms of how we'll, interpret and identify these records.
Sure. And that's fine. That's, at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong way to interpret them, and everyone's going to come at them from a different angle for sure.
All right, Alan, let's get to your first pick for the night.
All right. First one I chose for us to all listen to and sort of figure out is this one. It is, clicking buttons here.
I'll be right back.
Finnish band called Minator,
wait.
and this is their second album called 2. Not the most creative name ever for an album, but hey, it'll work. They only did the 2 albums. Yeah, it kind of fell apart after that, so not widely known. And this one, let's see, buttons I was clicking was to double check the date that this one came out. I want to say it's around 2007. Okay. So yeah, looking at something relatively early, if we're considering this new wave of traditional heavy metal or not. This album, the reason I picked it is that it starts to lean into that epic category a little bit, and I have a feeling that's one that's going to haunt us a little bit tonight. Is what do you do with the term epic?
It's its own thing.
Is it its own genre? Is it just an adjective that you apply to other genres when a band adds a few little elements here or there?
But if there's power metal and you say epic power metal, I know what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
I know from my years of listening to the epic stuff, I know that it isn't traditional Germanic or European power metal. It's got more of a epic feel, more of a triumphant, maybe more of a. Anyway, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah. We'll definitely be picking that one apart, I think. Yeah, and this one, has some of that, in the trappings. It definitely has it, in the cover art. Very Conan, inspired. A lot of the song titles, in terms of axes and steel and all this kind of stuff, kind of lean that direction. Musically, though, this one for me, really focuses on the doom metal side of things, which, hey, Finland bands, they tend to be pretty good at that, I hear. So yeah, with this one, it's really, my take on it was, it doesn't have, a huge, traditional metal sound in terms of, again, the capital T traditional bands. It is playing, more with the doom elements, being a little bit, crunchy, a little bit, raw around the edges. It doesn't necessarily have a ton of the epicness built into the music itself. There's some, not as much as a lot of other bands where this term will get thrown around. So for me, it's like, there's some, playing with the lyrical thing, but the big thing here is, just it really is a doomy thing. When you look at the liner notes in here, all the thank yous are doom bands, Witchfinder General, Candlemass, Trouble. Yeah, it's a whole list of doom stuff, start to finish. So for me, I ended up thinking, Minator probably just needs to stay in the doom category. I don't feel a need to, move it into anything like traditional heavy metal or anything like that. I think at the end of the day, it's got a little bit of, these epic overtones to it. I'm happy leaving this on the doom metal shelf, next to the Candlemasses, the Troubles, and all of that kind of stuff. So interested to know, what did you two think of Minator?
I just want to highlight North of the Rockies here. Epic metal is more heroically conceptual. Lyrically, yes, and also in the riffs. There's a heroic, triumphant vibe to the riffs, too. So, it isn't just thematically, it's all the way to the core of what they're playing and how
even the song structures and tempos. The more I've thought about it, because I guess Kellen said, we've been working on this topic with one another for well over a month, and epic is not something I've typically used as a genre tag in the past, but digging through these albums and thinking it through more, I think epic really does probably deserve its own little genre tag. And yeah, like North said, that would be one of the things. There is a very particular type of tempo, a type of song structure. The strongs are more
loping, leading up to a gallop type of.
They take their time and build to things, rather than just being based around one key riff for 4 minutes, or just a traditional structure of verse, chorus, solo, chorus, verse, chorus. 4.5 minutes later, we're done. So yeah, I think Minator is playing with the epic material there a little bit, but not enough that I wouldn't refer to them as an epic band to anybody I was trying to describe them to. But let me hand the Minator baton over to y'all.
Yeah, so I will agree here. This band, specifically on this record, reminds me a little bit of Gates of Slumber.
Good comparison.
And you look at the album cover, we got a battle axe. You think it's going to be a little bit more on the, epic side of things, right? Is it how close is this going to be to your Man of Wars, for example, in terms of influences? But no, this is a punishing doom record. But I don't think it occupies the same space in terms of, not only just lyrically being epic, but understanding how to write songs in a way that would also drive home that theme on top of it. Like I totally, they're a crushing doom band. I love this record. Just 2 releases. I feel some way like there's parts of this Finnish scene in the same way that I would group the Reverend Bazaar, right? In the way that I would almost see Cathedral. There's something about it that takes it beyond traditional doom for me. But I wouldn't call it epic, and I don't think it deserves to be considered to be like a traditional record.
Okay. Marty, what do you think of this one?
Oh, my only notes for this are epic stoner doom meets Celtic frost with a slight twist of Reverend Bazaar. Man, this is another one of those records. Maybe if I spent more time with it, my brief encounter with this record it seemed a little confused. As the record kind of went on, it changed a bit. Like they were shifting ideas and styles a little bit, all kind of within the same medium, but not produced really well, which is kind of a thing with epic. The epic side typically has more of a recorded in a basement kind of feel, but if we're trying to clump this in with new wave of traditional heavy metal, nah, it's more in the doom for sure for me, 100%. And you guys are way more eloquent in explaining this than me, other than I hear some the first song in particular, the Celtic Frost, is like, whoa. And especially the low tune, really fuzzed out guitar and the style of the, sound like a guy playing chords with his mittens on. It's just heavy and simple and cool. And
Yep, a lot of it's kind of slow. Yep.
Yep,
Mhm, has a
slow.
slow
The Celtic
pacing.
Frost has got a groove to it, but
Little
then it
bit,
goes
yep.
into more doom, and it gets a little strange at times, like the Reverend Bizarre stuff, which I do enjoy. I've got quite a good handful of Reverend Bizarre records, but yeah, this is not the way I understand the wave of traditional heavy metal. This can't go there. Nope.
Okay. So we all agree what to do with Minator. So Marty, why don't you tell us which of yours you want to have us discuss first?
Well, let's start off with Elders, Dead Roots Stirring. We covered this album on a album club, and I remember the reason I picked this record was I know Kellen and I were kind of butting heads on the fact that he thinks it's absolutely 100% metal. I think TJ does as well. Not for me. I hear what I say, just barely slides into metal territory. I hear more desert rock in this. I hear Caius. I hear Southern California Fu Manchu in this. Why is that? Yeah, there's still distortion here, but if you listen to it, either they're playing on a single coil pickup or they just have the pickup selector on the neck pickup, which is typically a bluesier tone for like solos and stuff. That's where they're playing all these riffs at. It has a thinner, it isn't the gain isn't saturated. It's very much it sounds like a desert rock record. It sounds like a Caius or Fu Manchu to me. What else I say here? Yeah, basically that's it. And I know the discussion was, is it metal or not? I think it's easy to lump them in as metal, but they might have some flirtations with it, but I just don't. I'm not feeling it. I just don't think it. I'm not saying it's bad. It's a good record. I just don't think it's necessarily tried and true metal. We'll start with you, Kellen.
Yeah, I mean, this is for sure going to be a consistent theme where Marty and I disagree.
Dude, it's not a metal record. It is just not a metal record.
Let's get it rolling.
This is the one. The next one on my list is there's no convincing or swaying my judgment on this.
Right.
1 hour in, and Alan had to start hitting the bleep button.
We behave for a little bit. Okay, so
just get right to the shit now.
Yes. Yeah. Do I think it should be considered a traditional heavy metal record? No. But do I think this falls under being considered metal, period? Yes. Yes. So there you go. There you go.
What is your point of reference?
I mean, for the same reason that you probably are looking at, like the Lucifer record as being 70s rock.
Yeah.
Right. I think,
and I'm not saying it's a bad thing that this is a heavy rock record. It's good.
I know you love, and like there's some Kai stuff that you love, right?
I fucking Sky Valley is a perfect riff record. That record is perfect. It's perfect. Great.
Yes, but I just think
I own it. It's awesome.
I think it falls under the metal world.
These guys could open for Caius, and it'd be a fine desert rock tour.
Yes. Okay.
Rock. Anyway,
so yeah, I just think it falls for the same reason that like that 1970s. I know Marty doesn't think that Black Sabbath is a metal band, so
they got metal. The first album is metal album is for the time it's metal, but
there you go. You can send all your emails to.
Thanks, Marty. You just cost us 4,000 subscribers.
Did I ever say that Sabbath wasn't a metal band? I mean,
yes, you said it like 60 seconds ago.
The first album is very bluesy. It's a heavy blues record.
All right. Okay. Well,
they get more metal as they went. The next album, metal for sure.
For me, that is metal enough to get them there. So I relinquished the floor. There you go.
Because you have no argument. You got no legs to stand on. Go back in your corner and weep, Alan.
Marty, do you consider Caius heavy metal?
No,
you don't. Okay.
No,
just checking for consistency there. I'm not.
Do I care? Does it matter? It doesn't matter. They're a heavy band. I like them. I like Queens of the Stone Age. It's good.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I'm not going to be much help in resolving this one because this one does fall into a style that, I never quite know where to put them. I agree. Yeah, it's not traditional metal with a lowercase t, an uppercase T, a T with the two little dots over the top of it, like it's a Motorhead logo. No T's here. Doesn't have an epic vibe to it whatsoever. It doesn't really go in that direction. It's got a very doomy sound to it, but yes, it's doomy through the lens of that kind of stoner rock scene. And that is a scene that, while I enjoy a lot of bands from it, I don't know where the boundary lines are. I don't know where you stop being doom and you drift into being, just stoner rock. And I don't know where there's a desert rock somewhere there too. And I don't know if the desert rock's in between the two or if it's up here in the corner, or
the desert and the stoner they could be, skipping to the picnic place with carrying the basket and,
maybe. I don't know. I've never sat down and, worked through enough of this stuff, to really find the lines or to know the differences. These terms get used. I know they're established, in people's minds as having a particular meaning. I don't know where they are. And as such, I don't quite know where to put Elder on that particular spectrum. Are they just doomy sounding enough to, kind of creep into the edges of that 70s metal sound where the Black Sabbaths and such were at? They might be, but their sound might be, actually really well entrenched in the desert rock sound. And I just don't know it because I don't know how to use the term desert rock correctly. So yeah, my take here is going to be, not traditional metal of any sort. They have the stoner doomy vibe.
Sure.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's enough to qualify them, as just like a 70s style doom metal, or if no, that we just have to, completely put them over into either stoner rock or desert rock. I'm sorry, I just don't know where those boundaries are at.
They would have flipped that pickup selector to the gain, to the bridge pickup, and a little more gain. It might have swayed it, but I know that's picky, but it's true. Anyway, go ahead.
See, for somebody, you're using music words that, want, well,
you're using dinosaur science earlier, so I'm like, feathers.
Well, exactly, yeah, but the
dinosaurs have dicks. I don't know.
Yeah, and once again, it's like gain. What, like the detergent? Hey, what the fuck are you talking about? I thought stoner bands were supposed to be dirty. They can't wash their clothes in gain. Their whites will come out too clean, and then they're not heavy at all. I can't help there. So I liked it from what I heard. For me, I start thinking, yes, bands maybe more like, The Sword, Caius, that kind of stuff, which when I'm in the mood for it, I really enjoy it, but I don't know which side of the heavy metal line it falls on, if it's a little outside in one of those other categories, or if we can kind of eke it in there with the 70s sound. Because a lot of the 70s bands did go for that sort of, warmer, fuzzier sound. That was definitely a thing. So it's not out of the question to have them in that conversation, but I can't, I don't quite know where to fall on this one. See what Aaron has to say here.
And Ben comes in. Elder uses the term heavy psychedelic rock on their Bandcamp. There you go. From the horse's mouth.
Yep. Oh, but the psychedelic thing, from what I understand about Elder, the psychedelic thing does not apply to all stages of that band's history.
No, this album is their first album. So
I think the psychedelic part came in a bit later in their catalog.
They went way more proggy later on in there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that might not, that tag really doesn't apply to this particular album based on what I heard.
Right.
So, all right. So, kind of a split decision on what to do with Elder there. But I think we're all agreeing that, it doesn't really fit in the traditional heavy metal category, at least. So we can agree on that. Friends?
Always. Okay. Forever. Yeah.
All right. We're back down to Kellen.
So let's go back to this conversation around epic. This is Chevalier with Destiny Calls. This came out in 2019, I believe. Finnish band. Now they're blending, I guess, sort of two different sides of what I'm calling traditional small T metal here, which is speed metal and epic heavy metal. What I think is most interesting is not just necessarily the songwriting here, but for me, a shared history in terms of production style. Meaning, like, if you were to listen to those early epic heavy metal, like Manila Road or Borkus Helm records, there's a very sort of unruly, unkempt kind of production. It's loose, it's ugly, and it's part of the endearing sort of qualities of the record. Speed metal, I think, shares a similar trait with that. A lot of the speed metal records that were coming out during this time period in 83, 84 also had a similar sound. And they've kind of realized that and captured it on this record. While they have longer songs, right? So the songwriting matches sort of the epic theme. The sound of it sounds far more aggressive and sort of shrill in a way that I don't think people would immediately associate it with epic heavy metal, especially if you compare it with something like Eternal Champion nowadays, which is far more predictable in terms of a sound. So a really unique sort of speed metal record that has epic heavy metal influences, but also sort of paying homage to a particular era in terms of production qualities.
So what's your final placement for that one? Traditional heavy metal?
Yes.
You're giving it the new wave of
I'm giving it new wave traditional heavy metal for sure.
Okay. I will agree with you on this one. The thing that stood out me with Chevalier is what you mentioned, the production sound. And they really were, it almost seems like going out of their way to try to make it sound like something that had been, recorded in 1983 and then dubbed onto a Sony tape and played on a Walkman a whole bunch of times. Which, to be honest, I did not think helped the music any.
Are you reading off my paper? Are you cheating off my paper, Alan?
I am not cheating off your paper. I whether just I didn't think the production helped the music in general, and B, because the bands, in this, that are kind of going for this kind of retro sound, to one extent or another, you already know that going in. And when they start really doubling down on it and like, we're not just going to, copy some speed metal from 83, we're going to try to actually copy the production of it in 2023, when it's so blatantly not obvious to do that. You could make this sound whichever way you wanted it to. So it's one of those things where they're just going so out of their way to look how true we are. We didn't just buy the vintage t-shirts on eBay. We didn't just copy the cover art style. We didn't just borrow some riffs and some leads. We even went for the authentic Walkman TDK 90-minute tape that's been crunched a few times while you're riding in the school bus to 8th grade kind of a vibe. To me, it struck me as a little corny that they would go to that much trouble to try to make it sound that way. That's my rant on the sound. But yeah, this one I agree. It's once again, they may be like a little drop of epic here, but I don't think it's enough to give it any kind of epic tag or flair. There's definitely nothing in the the doomy direction on this whatsoever. So yeah, I'm pretty content to say this would be an okay example of a new wave of traditional metal band that's active. I'll be honest, it was not my favorite of the things that we've listened to for this exercise. Wasn't terrible, not trying to shit all over it. Yeah, just their approach to the production kind of hit me the wrong way. And then I thought, the music's decent, but that's one problem, is there's so many bands of this ilk now that just being decent, it's not going to keep you on a playlist very long. So that was my take on it. Marty, it sounds like you might have a similar take. What notes are on your paper that I didn't read?
Actually, when I pulled up the cover of this to see what it was to listen to it, I realized that I own the CD. It's been in a stack of stuff to listen to for ages. I've got just as many records as CDs piled up as shit I haven't gotten to yet. So it was cool to check this one out. First off, chaos in the production. I have to agree with Alan here. The production sucks. It hinders the music greatly. It sounds like an 80s demo. Speed metal foundation for sure. The vocals are pitch style 80s vibe. So it's pitch singing, kind of screaming. It's cool, but with its share of problems. The mix is so off kilter. Kellen says unkept, and it's That's kind. That's a very kind assessment of the production. Very bass heavy. It's really kind of, and the guitars are so shrill. It's really kind of hear I don't hear the epic. I don't hear the epic. I just hear speed metal, with a little bit of power here and there. I don't think it's traditional metal, heavy metal to me. It's very speed metal. It sounds like it comes from the 80s. I think a better production, Alan's completely right. The production, in this case, the production really hurt the clarity of these songs quite a bit. You get the gist of what's going on, but there's a viciousness to it, which very much tells me speed metal. So, I mean, for splitting hairs, I can't say, yeah, traditional metal. It doesn't jive for me, but you can tell they're I think maybe leaning into the more aggressive side of that. Like I said, better production on this record. What were they thinking? I mean, the stuff is good singer. Sounds like everything is good. It's just musically, it's just a mess sonically. Yeah. Ellen and Marty recoil and lowercase t steals a point. Thank you, Howard Sanders Cosell.
Tim is definitely keeping score.
He's keeping score
tonight.
So yeah, the way I understand new wave of traditional heavy metal, nah, not this band. Kellen,
is it my turn again?
Yeah, no.
It's not.
No,
I just went.
No.
It's my turn. Shit.
No.
Alan,
try again.
God, I'm confused.
Cavalier was
like doing all this talking. I just talked,
Yeah.
so I figured I was done. Okay.
Yeah. No, but yeah,
Okay.
Cavalier was Kellen's album. So
Yeah. Right on. Sorry
Cavalier.
for the mismatch there.
It's all good.
All right. Are you sure you're on the right person, Marty?
Oh, yeah, good.
Are you really sure?
No. All I know is Elder's not metal, so we're good. I am steadfast in my my conviction.
Maybe over winter break I'll have time to dive into the whole stoner desert thing, and I shall come back and cast a tie-breaking vote on Elder.
Listen to Caius Sky Valley over and over and just revel in the awesomeness of that record and be happy with that trip right there. Then get back into metal.
That Blues for the Red Sun, that awesome albums. Next one off of my stack, Italy's Doomsword, and the album My Name Will Live On. Now we getting into some epic shit right here, boys and girls. And it's funny because the name of the band right away, you can't spell Doomsword without doom.
Yep.
So it right away is kind of pushing your brain in a certain direction.
But they're not doom. But anyway, go ahead.
Wait your turn, mister. No, hold on. But you're checking out the cover art, the album title itself, there's some epic vibes already starting to just waft off of this thing pretty hard. And when you get into the actual music here, this is, if I remember right, this might have been the band's last album. I always forget if they had one after this or if this was the last.
There's a record that follows.
Okay, so this is number 3 of 4. This is by far my favorite by them, which is why I picked this one. The songs here, first thing off, the epic elements go into overdrive. You have, those slower, kind of longer song structures we talked about earlier. You've got, the vocals that just really drip bravado. A lot of the vocals, they have, a little bit more of a somber tone, which is where some of the doom can start to creep in. However, reading up on a lot of epic metal stuff, from different, websites and sources over the past month, that's a vibe that also gets associated with the epic territory. And it's where epic and doom start to bleed together a little bit. Epic doesn't have to be, by the power of Grayskull, I'm going to, conquer all. Epic can also be, we are horribly outnumbered and we're all going to die, but by God, we're going to take some of them down with us as we fall.
We'll die as brothers.
We shall die as brothers. Yes, absolutely. And Doomsword's playing that angle of, the epicness. There is some traditional metal buried in here. Absolutely. You've got, some, faster double bass drumming going on at times. You've got some, hot shot guitar, leads at times, really good solo sections and stuff. So it's a very interesting blend. The production here is really good. It really plays, it's got a very rich sound that, again, adds to that whole epic vibe. So great album, love it to death. Question is, what do you call it? This is one that's always been problematic for me because, like I said, it's got this weird combination of elements. As I've read more stuff over the past month or so, I'm prepared to say that, yeah, this should be put into a genre of epic metal. That if we're gonna allow that to be its own thing, this would be a great example of it. I'd qualify it maybe as being doomy epic metal. There's just enough of a doom vibe. I think that's an important qualifier to separate it from some other things that could be put into epic as a category. As such, I wouldn't necessarily put it into new wave of traditional heavy metal. This may be where Kellen has a different take. I'm going to be real interested to see how he puts that. But yeah, I guess in this case, I'm sort of splitting epic apart from traditional and saying there's enough of a difference in style there that I wouldn't describe this to somebody as a traditional metal band or sound in the capital T sense. Definitely not. In the lower T sense, there were bands in the 80s doing this kind of stuff, of course.
Right back.
But they were kind of few and far between and not always that well renowned. It's a scene that has gained strength with time. You can obviously point to things like early Manowar, Into Glory Ride. You can point to Manila Road. Nobody knew who Manila Road was until the 2000s. I know because I tried talking to people about them in the 1990s and people looked at me like I was speaking a different language. So yeah, I've said my piece. We'll pass this over to Kellen here. I want to put this in the epic metal category, which is close to that traditional metal category. They're side by side, but I'm not comfortable kind of putting it in the under the traditional umbrella. I think a better descriptor, if I'm trying to get is somebody introduced to Doomsword, I want to compare it to the epic metal bands, not to just a wide range of various traditional metal bands. So let me zoom back out here, and Kellen, let me let you have your say on Doomsword.
So yeah, I agree that if I had to pick between this being a doom band and an epic band, I'm going to choose the latter. Where this is actually stylistically, and some of the bands we're going to talk about later on, for me personally, will fall under a sort of the traditional banner. What I do think I just want to take a moment to pause because Doomsword gets started in 1998. And I think at some level that sort of disqualifies me from associating them with this era, this latter era that's been happening that we're talking about tonight. They, I think for me, are a band that sort of bridges the gap, that carried sort of this torch for epic heavy metal at a time when it was not a big thing. I mean, if you want to say in the 1980s, it wasn't a big thing either. That's fair enough. But I think they're a really cool band based on that. The other key thing that I need to talk about with this band is they are a great example about how the genre evolved. At this time that they have going, you have sort of the Viking era Bathory emerging. And that plays a really important role in shaping what I think epic heavy metal has in a lot of ways evolved into today. So
agreed.
It's an influence that would not be so explicitly stated if you were to just go back and listen to those early Manowar or Omen, etc. It's a band that had to emerge in the time that they did, and I agree with Alan. They're an awesome band. So I personally see them as epic first. This record in particular, I think definitely like their first album is very much a bit more of a sloppy doom release.
Yeah.
The last one is even a little bit darker and somber.
Yep.
The one that precedes it, Let the Battle Commence, is very much, it tells a story specifically of Viking heritage. So it's even deeper into the Bathory sort of.
And it does so well, but very slowly.
Yeah. To me, this is, I understand like the desire to sort of bring those two descriptions together because this band has some heavier, doomier qualities. And I think if we were to sort of dive deeper into a particular area of Manila Road, you'd find the same sort of blurring the lines. You could say the same thing about Manowar. So, but that it's that Bathory introduction that really takes this band to interesting places. And this record, by all means, is one of the more heavy metal out of the entire selection. So, big Doomsword fan. I just when I was listening to the lyrics I just posted in the chat, I thought were perfectly suited for the attitude of this evening. So awesome record, epic for band. But anyway,
you guys aren't my foe. No way.
Yeah, no, the lyrics on this album are just fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so your final verdict, Kellen, was more epic rather than trad.
Well, to me they're both. I remember when I started this.
Well, that's why I'm asking to clarify to make sure.
Yeah.
I know where you can
So I'm gonna put it under what I would describe as someone said, "Hey, what does Doomsword sound like?" I'm gonna first say they're a epic heavy metal band. But beyond that, if you're gonna say, well, bands playing in an epic style, did they have a role in today's traditional heavy metal? Absolutely. So that may be a longer winded discussion, but if I'm you're going to force me to pick, big T or epic, I'm going to say epic.
Fair.
All right. Yeah. Epic for me. I got to say, is there a more classic song as Death of Ferdia or Steel of My Axe? Oh, so good. Good stuff. This is a great band. Epic to me, especially like the European, like Italy in particular. This album is quite well produced, but there's a ramshackle lo-fi edge to, I mean, you think of Dark Quarter, early Dark Quarter is produced really rough, but the music is somehow just this blue collar nature of epic metal. There's just grassroots, however you want to say it. It just seems like every man writing triumphant songs about brothers in battle. I mean, in Doomsword, they go slower, they go like the, Steel of My Axe is a faster song, double bass on there. I can see where Kellen's saying there's some heavy metal stuff on here for sure.
Oh yeah.
But it's not an overlying factor for me. It's certainly the first thing I think of is epic. It's an epic metal band. And whether you want to tag some Doom on there, I mean, obviously Doom is in their moniker, which, yeah, it's just an epic metal band to me. And it was cool to revisit this one. I don't own this one. I have a CDR of it, but I spun the crap out of that CD. I wore the ones and zeros off that thing. It's so good. One of these days it'll turn up. But oh my God, the first Dark Quarter record is magic. And it's so lo-fi. And it's just such a and it's lo-fi in the way that defines the style. I mean, you listen to Manila Road, even in their later years. Mark was recording that stuff in his basement. It has a lo-fi quality to it. And it's just, dude, that is just crap. That's not lo-fi. It's crap. The mix, everything is so, I mean, to have a lo-fi quality, but everything's mixed well, like Dark Quarter, you can hear everything. That Chevalier or Chevalier or whatever.
There we go.
It's
Let
just,
it flow.
It's like someone's, had a Fisher Price. It's like a crappy black metal mix. It's weird. That record, there's potential there. Just the production kills it big time. Anyway. Okay. Who's next?
Marty, it is your turn to pull up one of your albums to the floor.
All right. Well, I don't own this one either, but again, it's another album club pick, and me and Kellen had come to blows with this one.
Opening old wounds here.
I'll wait till he grabs it. Yeah, Alan sent me the CD as well, Rick, and holy crap, what a revelation. And even it was the 2 CD set where they went through and re-recorded it. Even the re-recorded stuff, it still rules. Even with good production, it rules. Yep. So, yeah, I picked Witch Hazel 3, Pentecost. Came out in 2020. What label did that come out on? I don't recall.
Bad Omen.
That's right, Bad Omen. Okay, I struggle to even lump this into a metal adjacent category. They nail the 70s twin guitar vibe with their blatant Thin Lizzy worship. Again, that's not a bad thing. This band is good. They're really good. Good, but I rarely feel like spinning this. It's just, I'm so new to Thin Lizzy. If I'm going to listen to this style, I'm going to listen to Thin Lizzy. And that's just where I'm at right now. And listening to this record was cool because there's a lot of really well-written songs on here, a lot of great guitar work. It's there's a lightheartedness to it. But man, I listened to it. The distortion in the guitars, it's pretty barren of that. I struggle to even, people are lumping this in as a metal record. Man, I don't hear it. It's just a 70s rock with, epic, guitar. Thin Lizzy is the catalyst of this band. They're swinging hard from Linnet's nuts on here, which is fine. It's good. That's awesome. Lizzy really did, where they revolutionized that twin guitar thing. It influenced metal greatly, but these guys lean more into the non-metal side of it. If the feeling is there, I can see people that like metal. I mean, I do like this. I know TJ, he's gone hog wild for this band, and he's got a soft spot in his heart for this stuff, which is cool. Again, if it's playing, I'm liking it, but I'm just not ready to invest in it because I'm still trying to get Thin Lizzy stuff. So yeah, for me, non-traditional, this is not part of the metal conversation. Alan, we'll let Kellen stew for a few minutes.
Fair enough. For me, Witch Hazel, I've heard a couple of their albums. I like their music. I think they do it pretty well.
Oh yeah.
Comparing this, to other things we've already discussed tonight, for me, this, would line up pretty close to where Lucifer is at.
Yeah.
They're going for more of that, 70s sound. Now, there's no an occult vibe to this.
Nope.
Being a Christian band.
They're a Christian band.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But no, other than that, yeah, they're going for that more, 70s rock metal sound. So kind of, predating, all the 80s influences a bit. Personally, I don't get as much of a Thin Lizzy vibe from it as you do, Marty. I may just not have played it. I haven't played it as much as you, I'm sure, since you had to spin it a lot for the album club, and I did not that week. But I do like their sound. Wherever I put Lucifer is where I'm going to put Witch Hazel, though, and that's going to be in sort of they're doing the retro 70s kind of thing, just with the Christian bent instead of the occult bent. The other point I'd make for a comparison, there were bands in the early 80s still doing this style, to be fair. One thing as I played through this a couple of times that started to strike me was it reminds me a bit of the band Asbury, who has a big kind of similar to Witch Hazel. They have a cult following among metal fans, even though their music never really quite fits into any heavy metal category very well. Yeah, the difference is, Ashbury has like a very sort of, leaning more to like, a southwestern, not desert rock in the, stoner sense, just, that more almost like, slight Eagles influence. They don't sound like the Eagles. Don't take this the wrong way, people. They're a great band. Just, those kind of like, it's the more like Allman Brothers, almost like, Southern, let's go with that direction. More of like a Southern laid back, vibe to the guitars, where the songs have that more open feeling to them. Really nice guitar work, but the songs have a little bit more of a laid back vibe to them. And I get a little bit of that from Witch Hazel as well, which in my book, hey, that's another point in their favor. I like that. I've got a lot more Ashbury records than most people probably would want. But yeah, I could see myself picking up some Witch Hazel if they would show up, especially if I see them used. I want to buy them. Because it seems like my thing, but I wouldn't put it into traditional heavy metal. So again, I need that category for like the retro 70s metal rather than new wave of traditional metal. All right, Kellen, go get him, Tiger.
Me and Alan, Wonder Twins powers activate. We're on the same page a lot tonight.
Yeah. Here, because of the really unfair fight here, I was trying to get some kind of balance between the two of you, but no.
Let's go make another promo. Maybe it'll sell something.
All right. I mean, to be perfectly honest, if you're completely on the right page in terms of speaking to a 70s band, like that's not, and you're going to find it through other bands that I think are within this sort of scene. Hallis is another one that plays very much like in this prog rock style from the 1970s. Freeways. Alan, I think, has another choice here that he's going to pull up that also, I think, flirts with some 1970s sort of prog stuff.
It's so bad. It's
Fuck you, Marty.
so bad.
But yeah, I mean, because I'm on board with this 70s sound having more influence and a greater place within this movement, if you want to call it that, I'm by all means, I think them as a metal band that would be included based on the parameters that you have set forth. 1970s, not happening. Your retro crap, that doesn't work. Get it out of here. For me, it's staying at home. I'm happy with my witch hazel.
I'm not saying get rid of. I think it's good. I don't think it's metal.
Too.
I don't think it's metal. I'm not saying that you're taking this as I think the record is bad. It's just not metal to me.
It's 70s metal.
It's got flirts. I think the first track, it's got things get a little heavier. I'm like, okay, they're flirting with it. But they never fully get there for me. It's too light. There's a lot of light in there.
Sure. I mean,
there's not a lot of darkness in that music.
Talking like through the lens of all the lyrics, the concepts are, medieval knights essentially on it's that world. So from a Christian sort of, what do you want to call it, paladin perspective. So I totally get it.
If we weren't sitting here and you were talking to a friend, you would say these guys are metal. They're a metal band.
But I would definitely cite your influences.
Okay.
So I think for both you and Alan, that's important. Like, yes, there's a certain amount of, experience and standards that we have as to what qualifies for a metal. I have the same experience. I'm sure you do. Like, Corinne will be like, hey, I found a friend for you who likes metal. My first question is, okay, please go on, and right. Like, and I understand where you're coming from. But there are plenty of people out there who would look at something like in a hard rock category and also consider it sort of metal. Witch Hazel does the best of this 1970s sort of Thin Lizzy stuff right now for me. And I totally see where you're coming from. I'm all on board with it. Yes, if I had a heavy metal shelf, it's sitting right up there.
Right on. Whose turn is it anyway? Oh, that was me. It's Kellen. We'll leave you up. I mean, there's no point going around and around.
We've made our points. Yeah.
I really wish I don't know what it is. I mean, the one that's coming up that Alan picked too. It's just why don't I like it? I mean, I listen to it. I hear all the good in it. Musical.
Because you're a mean girl, Marty. You're a mean girl.
Musically, I listen to it. I'm like, this is really well done. I like a lot of the stuff. It's hitting on a lot of things I like, but I don't see myself being called to it or listening to it, or I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, Kellen.
Okay. My choice here.
Your choice.
Let's go next. Okay. This is a band that I think is actually very, very important to what we're talking about this evening. This record, though, is a little bit of an exception. So this is In Solitude. Their last record they put out called Sisters. For me, they sort of set the framework for a lot of the kind of occult rock metal bands that would follow them. Even if, their first record, I have this somewhere, comes around in 2008, was very much like a Merciful Fate, King Diamond inspired record.
Yeah.
But by the time they get here on their third release, they've started to pull into kind of goth influences, kind of goth rock.
Okay.
And it's, if you think about like a band, they're from Sweden, like look at where Tribulation is now. And the direction that they've taken. Other bands that come to mind for me, like Idle Hands. There's a Night Eternal band that's on Van Records, I believe. That's also kind of playing in this occult. Yes, it's to me metal, but there's very much like a post-punk influence as well on this sound. And I think that's a cool way that instead of doing something that was so explicitly pulling from an earlier band's influence, like Merciful Fate, as great as they are, the fact that they found something about like occultism in a different genre and brought that in to be, I think it was a creative way to approach it. You can't talk about, in my opinion, you cannot talk about the new wave of traditional heavy metal without talking about In Solitude, and the fact that they kind of took this route, I think, is interesting. That where you started with something sort of undeniable, by the time they end is sort of shifting the paradigm a little bit. So it's kind of potentially a divisive subject given their other influences, but it really be an important band. The 3 records they released are essential for anyone who's interested in this time period in heavy metal history.
All right. Alan, your thoughts on In Solitude Sister?
Yeah. Wasn't familiar with this album before we got into this project. It was a really interesting listen. Kellen's right. In Solitude, was one of those, first, handful of bands that started to get on people's radar when the term new wave of traditional heavy metal was really starting to coalesce into a thing. And this would be roughly around 2008 or so. Yeah, there were a few bands, along with, Portrait, I think, was another key one from that era. Enforcer also, just to have some things to show there. The deal within Solitude, my understanding, and I don't know this band's catalog really well. Kellen just said, the first 3 albums are essential for this scene. From what I have read, digging around through reviews and stuff, on all 3 of their albums, it seems like everybody would agree with Kellen that the first 2 are essential for this scene. But this 3rd album took a lot of heat from some sectors of the fan base when it came out. And it's because of that element. And Kellen described it very well. I have nothing to add. Yes, they're bringing in kind of a gothic influence to it, and it has a little bit of a post-punk vibe to it as well. Notes I put down were things like, almost like, a more muscular, metallic, Floodland or Bauhaus kind of overall gloominess to the album, which was kind of cool. I kind of liked it, but a lot of people did not like it. This was for some people, this was In Solitude jumping the shark out of the genre. And it comes back, I think some of that comes back to where Kellen started tonight. How narrowly are you going to let this genre be defined, or how expansive are you going to? For folks that are taking it very literally, that this is just a new wave of bands trying to sound traditional, that does put a lot of limits on you. You're kind of scrunched in at that point. If you start introducing new weird combination of elements, you are no longer sounding traditional. And to the people that want things like in this, very small box, then it's like, well, fuck you. I don't want this album. You're no longer playing traditional metal. You're trying to bring a new element into it, which, as Kellen said, now to other people, that was kind of maybe a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, now this band is actually trying to do something a little more unique. They're trying to find their own niche instead of just copying what, one of the best metal bands ever did before these guys, were, able to, stand up and, write or wipe their own butts. So it kind of depends on where, again, you're going to fall on that spectrum. I didn't do the math. Let's see. This came out in 2008. So I think this came out in 2008. Let's assume
this came out in 2013.
2013. Okay. If we, then definitely. If they were born in 90, they would have been 23 by this point. So, and Merciful Fate 7 years before that. So wiping their butts, nothing. They probably weren't even born. If they were born, they certainly weren't up on their vocabulary or motor skills. So there, long-winded way of saying they weren't born yet. So yeah, where do you put this? The question really for In Solitude is, where do you do with this particular 3rd album? Which, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kellen, this was their last album, right?
Yeah,
correct. Last record.
Yeah. Do we know what happened to the band? Did they get pulled apart because of musical differences? Did other things happen? Did they move on to other
I remember
projects?
when it happened, and I didn't care, so I never really investigated much.
Fair. I didn't know. I didn't really know when it had happened. I'm just kind of wondering, if to some degree this album sank them, because they were a band that had some, hype around them. There was, there was banter about, In Solitude. But yeah, this album, definitely seemed to split the fan base, and I'm wondering if it was a little bit of a death knell. I'm not sure. Regardless, I'm okay with this being part of that new wave of traditional heavy metal. I think it has retained enough of their sound from their earlier albums that it's okay. But yeah, if I was describing this to somebody, I would definitely make it clear to them. It's like, look, these guys were doing something different on this album this time around. There's going to be this strong goth influence. So if you want to check this album out, be prepared for that. It's not just another wannabe Merciful Fate kind of album. So new wave of traditional heavy metal with a interesting gothic post-punk twist to it. Marty, your take.
You know what? I had their debut on vinyl in Solitude, self-titled. Got it because people are saying Merciful Fate, Merciful Fate. I got it and I listened to it a bunch. I'm like, this isn't Merciful Fate enough for me. And I thought it fell short. They poked at the influence a bit, but never quite got there. In fact, I think I gave the record to Aaron the Metal Theologian, some VCLT, but so it was interesting to hear this record. And I'm a little surprised to hear the gothic. You say gothic, and because I hear garage rock. It sounds garage rock, a little bit of psych. There's a very slight underlying metal influence, especially on the song Pallid Hands. The vocals fit the garage rock influence as well, as does the raw live garagey production. I think the sound of it's very live, kind of energetic. Again, I hear garage. I don't hear gothic. I mean, I like traditional gothic music. I like, a lot of that stuff. So to hear you say gothic, it makes me kind of want to listen to it again, see if there's something I missed. But I mean, my first initial thought is this sounds like garage rock, a band that went about as far as they could from where they started into a completely another genre, but with still retaining a little bit of a safety net there. But I don't know. I struggle to call this metal. Again, traditional new wave of traditional heavy metal. I could see why people were had their underwear up in a bunch about this one, because it's quite a shift. I did not hear what is the name. The middle album is The World, the Flesh, the Devil. I did not. You know what? Looking at Metal Archives, which is not a good barometer here. I mean, the first one was 89%. The World, the Flesh, the Word, the Flesh, the World, the Flesh, the Devil is 80%, and Sister was 89%. And there was 11 reviews on that one. So people, it might be one of those records that as time went on, people maybe started coming around to it. Because I think when it dropped, it probably, 2013, it would have been like, what? But yeah, I struggle. It's a good garage rock record. Again, not metal for me. Not metal enough.
I just want to jump in. I agree with that interpretation of the record, though, Marty. Like, I think there was a bit more excitement surrounding, like, Portrait, for example, is a band that's kind of stayed the course over the years.
Boy, that first Portrait record, I think I sent that one in the same package to Aaron as well. That first record sucked. I did not like the first Portrait record. That was another one they said Merciful Fate. I didn't hear it at all. It was kind of like not good. They got better. That band got way better as they went.
But in Solitude is a band that was very much, I would say, grouped in with a lot of those early Swedish bands. And they, in 2013, this was like, what happened? You just had this momentum. They're on Metal Blade Records, moved from Hive Roller.
Yep.
And just did something very original. But now you look at a number of bands who sort of incorporated some element of dark rock into their heavy metal. Whether you think it disqualifies them as a band or not, it's a thing now. You see more and more of it appearing. And the fact that a band like Tribulation, which the horror, that was such a amazing, like, thrashy death metal record.
Super. Yeah. Then they went goth. I hear goth in their music. I don't hear it on Sister. I don't hear it.
But like, it's just, you see more of it now. So
so in a lot of ways, that In Solitude record was kind of ahead of its time.
For sure.
If they could have just weathered the storm a little bit longer, they might have hit in a little bit sweeter spot.
Yeah, it looks like they've split up in a couple of, like, a different doom band, Saturnalia Temple. I believe the drummer is now drumming for your favorite epic doom band, Procession, which we covered on Album Club, the Chilean epic doom band.
Yeah. Yep.
So they're in other bands now, but no more longer. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting about bands that do kind of are one of the first to strike out and try something, because in some cases it blows up big and they kind of lead a whole movement and they're at the forefront of it and it plays out great for them. And other times they just get smacked down because people are not willing to accept it. Folks have been kind of commenting on that in the chat, that it's metal fans can be a pretty tough crowd to, if you go too far out of your box, you are going to hear about it.
It's a ballsy move what they did with this record. I didn't hear the transitional record, but to go from where they started to it's ballsy. It's again, kudos, doing what you want, trying something new. But at that point, you have a fan base to consider. Not that you write music for the fans, but God, are we too far away from where we started? Who knows? Anyway, Alan.
All right. So number 3 on my stack. Let's talk. Because Kellen and I haven't talked about this band enough recently. Let's talk. My third pick was Kira Thungel's comeback album.
This album ruled, by the way. I have not heard this record and it's really good record. Good
Spoiler alert. Thanks, Marty.
Sorry. I'm just saying I'm psyched that you picked. I finally got to listen to it. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to pick this one because we talked. I asked Kellen specifically while we were, kind of making the arrangements for this, like, do we want to stick strictly to, we said, we're sticking to newer albums, 2005 forward. Do they have to be by newer bands that came up during that time, or can they be new albums by older bands? I was originally thinking of like maybe picking something from Manila Road's later catalog, and I was like, oh no, we could definitely pick something from older bands. And you left Manila Road off my list and decide, we'd talk this one instead. In part because Kira Thungel's always been one of those bands for me that's kind of hard to pigeonhole. And Kellen's got a video of him and I discussing the new album coming up on his channel, so I'm not going to go real deep on the band here. In terms of breaking down the album and their overall sound, Kira Thungel, first off, there's a strong dose of epic about their music. And, once again, it's usually more the defiant, the world is going, getting flushed down the toilet, but, we are going to be screaming angrily all the way down, kind of defiance. It's that, kind of resilient type of epic vibe. For me, there's always been a strong doom vibe in their music. Not every song, their songs can vary a lot in terms of, tempo and structure and such. But there's always some, that really do gear it down, get much slower, and the music has this very gloomy, dark aura. Even with some of the faster songs, they always sound like they're pissed off about something. So for me, it's always been like, there's a doominess here, but it's not a conventional doom sound at all either. This isn't a Candlemass or a Trouble or a Black Sabbath. Again, it's more aggressive overall because, it's like we're sad, but and that makes us angry. It's not like we're sad and we're going to be lethargic or cry or forlorn. It's like we're sad and we're pissed off that we're sad. So fuck everything kind of doom. So Kira Thungel's always been, I've never known which shelf to put them in or what genre to tag them with. But now again with this kind of a revelation for me that epic can be its own tag. I'm putting Kira Thungel under this doomy epic metal categorization, kind of what I did with Doomsword. I think epic metal maybe describes them best. They definitely play a lot into the unusual song structures of epic metal. Epic metal is quoted, on different sites and articles I've read, having unconventional song structures, having, very unique characteristic vocals, which Tim Baker definitely fits the definition there.
That guy sings from the corns on his feet all the way up to his.
Yep. There's there's the obvious fantasy sword and sorcery connections with all the Michael Whalen art, the connections to the Michael Moorcock character. Moving forward, Kira Thungel for me goes into the epic metal category with a strong doom presence to it as well. So I wouldn't consider them traditional, new wave of traditional heavy metal. Yes, they were a band that was around in that 80s scene. We could, if we're doing the lumping thing I described earlier, we could lump them in with a lot of the other 80s bands. Yeah, but once again, it feels a little weird to me to do that because these bands like Kirathungal, Manila Road, these were not highly regarded bands back then. Lumping them in alongside Accept and Priest and Maiden and even Merciful Fate, it just feels odd because it's like, okay, these are the popular kids over here. It's like here's the football jock, kind of big and ugly and mean sounding, but he's going to beat you up. Here's the kid with the cool car, that's doing donuts out in the parking lot after
the IROC Camaro,
here's the head cheerleader that everybody's wanting to date. It's going to be the popular girl forever. Even at the reunion, people will still be hitting on her. Here's the misfit kid, sitting over in the corner, like scratching things into the surface of the desk with switchblade that everyone's half scared of. These bands were kind of the black sheep of that scene, so I don't feel right about kind of having them under that same umbrella. So Kirathungal, for me, I want to keep them out of traditional heavy metal. Doomy epic metal, I think, is the way I like this one. But y'all may disagree, so pass it over to y'all.
Kellen.
Well, I mean, I do want to go back to, I think Scott had a comment about doesn't qualify for because of the new wave conversation. It's a band that's,
and that's why I asked you. Yeah.
I totally get that. If anything, well, I may end up all by my lonesome for much of this evening, but if there's anything that I think Marty and Alan may side with is this time period, if for no other reason, the fact that the bands that were not discovered or were underappreciated during the 1980s, they were able to benefit by the popularity that this sort of past couple of decades provided. So it's like it's been talked about multiple times. It's great that Mark Shelton got to see his band praised and recognized and emulated by the time he got to see those years. And I would say the same thing to Alan's point about the lonesome reject scribbling things into a desk kid. Sirith Ungol, and very much I can understand them also being associated with that kind of thing. So it's also historically for me important to cite bands that released like major records. So we have a Sirith Ungol record here. We talk Manila Road's sort of 2000s era. There's a lot of great records there.
Yeah.
But if you also Solstice, White Horse Hill, I think was released in 2018.
Sounds about right. Yep.
Satan, Life Sentence comes in 2013. Whether you love it or not, they came back with records that made an impact and recruited a brand new generation to their sound. And I think that's important. So I was happy to see an older band included on the list tonight for conversation's sake.
Yeah.
I agree that, in the sense that I'm going to describe it first as an epic heavy metal band. That's the first tag I'm going to go with. But once again, to reiterate this point, it's under this umbrella for me. So,
you're kind of lumping the epic stuff into the traditional category, right. And I'm splitting them out. Is I think where the pattern we're starting to see here, and that's okay. That's going to be two different takes.
So I think it's really interesting. I brought up here just to go back to this point. I'm looking here at 19. So I've got, King of the Dead sitting behind me here, and I'm looking at the 1984 Metal Massacre, right? Omen, Voivod, Overkill, Fate's Warning, Metal Church, Hellhammer, are all on. It's that time period. I think it's interesting. They sound totally different and deserve their own category if we're to talk about that today.
But back then, it wasn't necessarily that way. Those categories hadn't been dragged out of some journalist asshole yet.
Sure.
Well, you didn't need them back then. It's not that it was journalists hadn't invented them. What you didn't need to, because there's only
wasn't as
one
many
band that
bands.
sounds like
Yeah.
Hellhammer. There's
Yeah.
only one band that sounds like Manila Road. When everything has its own unique sound, you can't organize or classify them because it's just individual data points with no, with very limited similarities to each other. It's not until you have, large numbers of things and you start to see patterns that you can start to retroactively, apply those terms to it.
And there was
And then you start
90%
to
of
realize that
I'm sorry.
now there's a whole bunch of bands that sound like Hellhammer. Now there's multiple bands trying to do something like Venom, et cetera, et cetera. Then you need a term to be like, okay, if somebody just likes those bands, they like this particular style of heavy metal.
About 85% of the people back then too hated Hellhammer.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean-
that's again, nobody much. Kirithungal, had some visibility because they were on Metal Blade. Manila Road had no visibility. They had Abominable Snowman walking around in a blizzard on top of Mount Everest kind of visibility.
Yeah.
Nobody saw that shit.
Roadster Records, who? What?
It was their own little label.
Their own
They're
label,
in
yeah.
Lawrence, Kansas. It's like geographically the most isolated point in the center of the country. That's I've been to Lawrence. There's nothing out there. Yeah. So go ahead. Don't mind me.
No, I mean, I'm done. I'm done.
Oh,
So,
okay.
All right. Well, Marty, what do you?
I mean, I
take
gotta.
from all this?
I think the most comfortable place to put Cirithungal is in Epic, but I've struggled too. I mean, I only have a couple of their things, and I hear some traditional metal in there too. But Epic is the standout descriptor for me. This is a fantastic and classic band sticking to their deep running roots, true epic metal, ignoring the allure of modern times, which is what I gotta again applaud here. I mean, I didn't think that Forever Black was going to suck, but I had never heard it. And putting it on, I was like, wow, I think I like it better than Paradise Lost. I mean, that's the only other point of reference I really have. I used to have One Foot in Hell, or what's the one with the fish on it? The fish
One
on
Foot in Hell, the bug.
Yeah, I used to have that record, and I wish I kept it, but at the time I just liked it and gave it to somebody. It was one of those promos with the writing all over it, Alan.
Yeah.
But I should have kept it. But yeah, fantastic. I was happy to hear this record. It's really, really good. But for me, it's epic. I'm not going to go much more into it. I agree with both of you on this for sure.
Yep. Now, Marty, I guess just so because Kellen is still lumping. He's thinking the epic stuff still is traditional. Are you seeing it as a separate genre, separate from traditional?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
I
think it's got a completely different vibe.
Okay.
I think the vibe of it, it's a little more organic, a little more. It's the worn jeans. It's more like a holy pair of jeans that fit you really well. Whereas the epic is the fancy leather pants and may or may not have a cod piece. Type of, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Okay. No, just asking. So that we're kind of know where everybody stands on some of these.
Yeah.
It's all good. All right. So Marty, it's your turn to show off one of yours.
All right. Well, this is probably a pretty easy one. Let's just do Sacred Outcries, Towers of Gold. So yeah, I might as well just jump into this since I'm holding it up. Where's my notes? I mean, Kellen and I did a pretty extensive discussion on this on his channel. Go check it out. One of the world's best metal vocalists is on this. Epic world building melodies, atmosphere, and songcraft. Check. Proper power epic heavy metal for me all day long. New wave of traditional heavy metal. I think there's a little bit more epic, or there's a little more European power metal mix in this with where they glean a bit of the epicness is in the atmosphere, the world building qualities. So I really sorry, damn it. I can't put these guys in the new wave of traditional heavy metal. Good Greek band with a Swedish singer. Kellen.
Yeah, I actually would say this falls under a bit more of a power metal record for me. And important, no, I did not. What I specifically wanted to say like a European power metal record.
Mhm.
And I think that's an important sort of distinction that we need to make. Just because the American kind of power metal, I do feel, is one, fundamentally different than the European style.
Oh, totally.
And two, European power metal really flourishes through the 90s into the 2000s. It doesn't have that sort of loss in momentum. It had greater fan base, popularity, greater sales. So I think that's different in terms of like a rediscovery process that happens with American power metal. So for me, I'm going to say a power metal record. And I would also say it falls outside of the spectrum of being a traditional heavy metal record.
Alan.
Okay, that's interesting. I agree. Yes, there's very much a European power metal lean to this album. No doubts, it's got that influence. Yeah. That said, it's not an overbearing power metal structure to me. That it's still based pretty close to a more core traditional metal sound. Part of it too is that it's definitely leaning in the epic direction some. That it's going for some those big longer song structures. It's letting it tell its tale. I mean, it's a concept story album to begin with, but it's meant to have this kind of grandiosity to it. As such, the power metal vibe is there, but I could see this still passing as a current new wave of traditional heavy metal release. I would use those same qualifiers that y'all have. I'd be like, okay, this is a new wave of traditional heavy metal band, and we're going to expand. They're over here on the like power metal side of that bubble, not in the doom direction whatsoever. But yeah, so traditional heavy metal, but with this kind of epic power metal influence to them. It's not as maybe as much of a deviation of what In Solitude did, drifting, bringing in a lot of the goth, or if you want to refer to it as garage or post punk. They brought in a lot of it for the Sisters album we discussed. Sacred Outcries bringing in some of those things from power metal and epic metal, but I feel like they're staying close enough into that. They're close enough to the bullseye that I'm okay with this being referred to as a new wave of traditional heavy metal band.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. What did this album come around for you? I know you were a little.
I'm about. I like the album. I think it's. Again, it's that middle section of the album where they let it drag for a little too long across too many songs. If they'd cut 10 minutes out of the middle of this album, I think it'd be a lot tighter, more interesting. It kind of loses me in the middle. It comes back around really well at the end. So it's an album. I like the album. Unlike you and Kellen, I do not love the album. We'll leave it at that. But it's a good album, well performed. I'm not
amazing vocals. Holy crap!
Yeah, but I mean maybe that's part of it too. There's maybe a little. I think they rely on Daniel a little too much to carry the weight. I would like to. The music behind him is very good, but I feel like sometimes they're almost holding back. So it's like, we don't have to. We don't have to go over the top here. He'll take care of that. And it's just like, come on. Let's. We know he's amazing. Let's see what you guys can do. Let him let him go backstage, grab his bottle of water, sit back, and let's move you guys to the front a little more often and let you carry this story forward.
Right on.
But yeah,
fair
it is a very good album. A lot of folks in the chat are saying it's going to be like one of their top albums of the year. Can't fault anybody for that whatsoever. I have a feeling it's not going to make my top albums of the year list. For a top 10, it would be in a top 20 easy. If I'm going to narrow it down to 10, it's probably just going to miss the cut by a few.
And Glenn, thank you so much for your contribution. We really appreciate it, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with us every week.
Appreciate it, Glenn. It's always good to see you in the chat. All right. That was your pick, Marty. Yep. So we're back to Kellen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here we go.
Here we go, he says.
Silver Talon.
Mm-hmm.
I was commenting on this the other night to Kellen. I'm like, what? Yes. Anyway, we'll get there.
So this record has something to do with, for me, a later sort of evolution of American power metal that starts to happen essentially in the early 90s. So Marty was remarking last night, it reminds a lot of Nevermore, and that's 100% right. Like
100,000%.
That's the band everybody
all I could hear.
references in every review of this album.
That's all I could hear. Yeah.
right. I think what's intriguing for me about this is not only like is the Nevermore thing, but that's also a band that's sort of a weird position in history, right? Because during the early 90s, they sounded heavier than I think most people were used to associating with a power metal band, even an American one at that. But I think the last, part of, if you look at like the last Liege Lord or Sabotage, like those later records start to get a little bit heavier. And then you throw in like, if the first thing that I heard was also the 2000s era Hellstar. Those records sound much heavier, almost like thrash releases in some ways by comparison to the like 80s American power metal stuff. So I think Civil Talon seems to be playing in that space. And I'm kind of curious as if you had taken the sort of street heavier nature of American power metal in the 1980s and it had evolved over time. If you could end up with something like Silver Talon, in the same way that Hellstar really changed and evolved over the years. So, but very technical sort of guitar work, same thing you would associate with Nevermore. For me, it's that sort of line between a modern sort of take at American power metal, but there's definitely like some power prog going on as well. So
not new wave of traditional heavy metal.
I mean, it's for me like it's enough of like on the cusp, right? Like the record that I'm going to show next, I also feel the same way.
Wait a minute, is it the one I think? Wow. Okay, right on.
Right. So anyway, I take it or leave it. For me, I think it definitely speaks to the new wave of traditional heavy metal fan base, but it's kind of just like a heavier power record to me.
Alan, your thoughts?
See, yeah, Nevermore clone, if it may sound unflattering, but that's everyone describes this band in terms of the Nevermore influence, which is pretty undeniable. They do it pretty well. Yeah, whether you want to call it new wave of traditional heavy metal, it depends. Again, where are we going to set some boundaries? Most to this point tonight, we've talked almost exclusively about 80s bands and 70s bands as our baseline.
Yeah,
this is the first time that we've come upon a band that's really wearing the influences on their sleeve from a 90s metal project with Nevermore. So is that too late to be drawing an influence from? Do you still get to be part of that club if your main influence came out in the mid 90s instead of the mid 80s? I don't have a horse in that race. Reading through different articles on some different websites, it's been interesting because yes, there are some people that really drill down on these bands should be taking their influence from the 80s to be part of this category. But others have some flexibility. One site I checked, very much said 80s and maybe 90s. They kind of left that 90s door open. And I wonder if they left it open specifically for someone like Silver Talon. Another one I checked, though, went the other direction. And they said these bands should take their influences from the 80s or 70s, which would open that door again more to the Lucifer and Witch Hazel and some others that we'll probably talk about. Mike, thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Mike, you're too kind, man. You better get another job with all this money you throw our way. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you,
man. So yeah, that's kind of the other question is, are we okay with this band being part of the new wave of traditional metal? Does Nevermore count as a traditional metal? And like Kellen said, it's kind of on the cusp because they're usually thought of more of like an American power metal, 90s American power metal at that, which is, yes, it's an evolutionary step away from the Omens and early Hellstars and such. But I think Kellen's also right. This one very much meant to cater to fans of new wave of traditional heavy metal overall. There's nothing here that's so glaringly out of bounds that it made me think, nah, that's a bridge too far. I think it still has enough traditional metal structure, even given all the Nevermore comparisons, that I'm okay with this one staying in the new wave of traditional metal category. If for no other reason, I don't feel like the only other place I think you could put it would be to try to call it similar to 90s US power metal. But other than Nevermore, what bands are you comparing it to? 90s US power metal is a pretty small niche.
Yeah.
That was not a popular genre. Nevermore was one of the very few exceptions that did well at that time. So yeah, for all those reasons, I'd say new wave of traditional heavy metal. Sure, I've got no problem with it there.
All right,
Marty, your turn to take a crack at this one.
I have to hard pass on new wave of traditional heavy metal. I see. I was honestly quite surprised to hear that the Nevermore influence jumped right off the page right away.
I was too. I was not expecting.
I was not expecting it even a little bit, and it really kind of blew me away. I mean, I see the band Nevermore, and anybody wants to check out, we did a deep dive on Nevermore with Jeff from Gas Masks and Hand Grenades. Check it out on the channels here somewhere. They were a band for me. They were the shepherds that ushered in the modern metal movement. And modern metal to me is I was starting a zine during this time. So it's I have a bit of a nostalgia around it. It instantly makes me think of Century Media. It's got this, when I heard Silver Talon, I'm like, this would have been a good band for Century Media back in the day. So I'm not hearing the new wave of traditional heavy metal. I hear modern, technically proficient. They find their own voice and style somewhere in a junk drawer of random World Dane and Jeff Loomis scraps. Good stuff, more progressive / modern metal to me. I mean, modern metal a classification? Probably not in the grand scheme of things, but in my brain, it is. I mean, I think of a time laboring over a zine and getting a lot of Century Media promos, Nevermore stuff, and other. This was very much a Century Media aesthetic during that time. And Silver Talon, kind of an eye-opening band. They're good. They're a good band. I just can't lump them into the new wave of traditional heavy metal. It's too modern. Nevermore was the face of the 90s, a transition away from that into what would come later. Thank you, Tip Fam. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yes, big thank you to Tip Fam. That's an interesting point, Marty, and it's a good point. Are they too?
I have them once in a while.
New. Something that's going to happen eventually, and I'm checking a date here real quick before I dive into this. I actually had a conversation along these lines with somebody in the comments on a different video this week about. That's not sorry. Give me 1 second. Just trying to get there's a whole lot of bands called Nevermore from the United States. It turns out.
I know. They're the last one. They're the last one on the list, by the way. I was like, what the fuck?
Here we are.
How many Nevermores were there?
Yep. So you're kind of right. We think Nevermore was one of the bands that kind of defined part of the sound of the 90s, the Century Media sound and stuff. And for folks like you and I, yes, that feels like it's pretty new. It's actually 30 years ago.
Oh my God.
The first Nevermore album came out in 95. So it's about to be 29 years.
My son today in the car said, Dad, was it next year or 2 years? Can you believe 2 years is going to be the 40-year anniversary of Halloween? I'm like,
anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, the first, Nevermore album, where I saw them starting to get a lot of attention, Politics of Ecstasy, 96. That's 20. Let's just go ahead and call it. We're a month away from it being 28 years old. It's not new anymore.
I know.
It's not even close to being new.
But it's still new in my head. I still remember the excitement of getting those promos, and it felt new at the time. Listening to this music, I'm like, wow, this is fresh and exciting and different. And
it is over a quarter of a century old, and as such, this is kind of for me. Whereas I think it felt like it actually does feel old enough that I'm okay including it there. Although again, I have the same knee-jerk reaction you do. That that's not part of the older metal scene, but at some point all of that 90s stuff is going to be sort of blended in with some of that 80s stuff as the traditional metal, and actually some of the 80s stuff is going to start to get lumped in with the 70s stuff as hard rock. This was the conversation I had with somebody in the chat, that they were sort of complaining that already, and we already see it a little bit. He was complaining about like teenage metal fans, the Spirit Boxes and Gingers of the world, already sort of referenced bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden as dad rock.
Yeah, well, Metallica's named that now,
and they don't even call it. It's not dad metal; it's dad rock. And he was griping about that, and my knee-jerk reaction is yes, kids these days with their stupid animals as leaders for a band. What kind of fucking band name is that? But when I stop and think about it, we did the exact same thing. In the early 80s, we did the exact same thing to Priest and Uriah Heep and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. All those old 70s bands, all of a sudden, that's not metal, that's hard rock, classic rock. How fucking boring is that? Take your bell bottoms and go keep on trucking, dude. We want to listen to some real fucking metal. We want it to be bright and shiny. We want it this and this and this. We might would have acknowledged, like, Richie Blackmore's a great guitarist, but Jesus Christ, the guy's old enough to be my daddy. I'm not interested in listening to his fucking band anymore. The same thing is going to happen, with that. I see it on some collector websites anymore. Some sites that used to be very exclusively 80s. Now it's like, 80s and 90s. It's like, it's close enough now. So the goalposts do change over time. Kellen, I think, made that point earlier tonight, and it's worth repeating here. Boundaries and things change over time. Nevermore was the face of sort of a new thing 28 years ago, but now they aren't. And it's something we didn't bring up, but I'll throw out there here. It's as good a place as any. Is it even fair to keep calling this movement new wave of traditional heavy metal anymore? Because that term's been in use now for a solid 15 years or more. This isn't new anymore. This wave is not new. This wave has been a thing for well over a decade. Why are we still calling it new?
I think the term, like in terms of describing it as a movement, I do see that as something that has caught more momentum in more recent history, right?
Well, it's continued to kind of curve upward, but it's not like it started 5 years ago,
right,
or even 10 years ago,
right? Like
and some of those bands, as we've been talking tonight, bands like In Solitude, Portrait, they had plenty of hype around them within metal circles as they were getting started, around 2010 and stuff. You saw these bands discussed plenty. They were not really buried underground. They were on Metal Blade in some cases.
Right. So I guess I'm at some point agreeing here. I know someone in the comments earlier mentioned that this is probably something that was used just for sort of whatever marketing purposes, or to try and drive.
Well, journalists are good at making descriptive terms to make their job a bit easier.
Right. But because for something like, why there's important to have generational differences with something like Doomsword, for example, versus, Eternal Champion, right? Like there's something fundamentally different about where they occur in time that I think is important to sort of separate them. But I don't know, like, when, if the idea is that because it's been going on for so long, we should stop using it, I to some point it's going to happen. I don't know what will be the flip, when it will turn off. But I kind of feel that way at this point about like what's going on with death metal. I don't feel like what we were comfortably talking about as like old school death metal as a revival it's kind of reached a saturation point for me where I don't hear that conversation as much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think we'll probably, to your point in your video, you talked about the new wave of traditional heavy metal YouTube page, which on almost a daily basis is putting out new records.
Yep.
So I can imagine in time this will end up fading from the conversation as a talking point because there'll be enough sort of general awareness. But I also do feel like as long as it is truncated and marginalized, I feel that also it's going to be something that follows it. It's also in the same way that it may be used as a description. It's also used as a derisive term, and I that's probably going to be a thing that we associate with. So
some people do. You're right, Kellen. I want to take us off on a small tangent, hopefully there. Because of that, let me make sure I'm not completely driving us into a ditch or something.
Dinosaurs had feathers. So.
A lot of them did. But yeah, you're right. Some people do kind of use it as a derisive term, or think of it as like a smaller kind of marginalized scene. I don't know if those are necessarily bad things. Not in terms of like trying to give the bands some kind of bulletin board material to get them all psyched up. One of the points in this conversation I was having in the different videos comments, it really began with the guy saying like, yes, I want some of these, bands to, make metal big again. This is the wave that, is actually going to, make metal popular, mainstream, huge, like it used to be. And think about it, before I, replies like, that's an interesting take. What do I think about that? And again, the knee-jerk reaction is to think, yeah, we want those big 60,000 seat arena tours like we had, back in 82 and 83. Do we? Would that actually be a good thing or a bad thing for that scene? You are right. The scene, is kind of, restricted in size or popularity, however you want to measure it. None of these bands we're talking about tonight, are up there on the levels of your Cannibal Corpses or your Slipknots or your Spirit Boxes. Those bands, those are huge bands, highly visible. Nothing we're talking about tonight is on that tier. I almost wonder if that's to those bands' advantage, because as such, they can be left alone to do their own thing. There's enough labels to support them. There's enough outlets if they don't want to use a label.
They don't need labels anymore.
With Bandcamp and such, yes, they don't even have to worry about a label if they don't really want to. There's enough of a fan base and enough infrastructure like the new wave of traditional heavy metal YouTube channel to help support them. Hell, we're here talking about it for several hours tonight. So, we're, doing our part to support the show. But it gives those bands a lot of artistic license. I don't think any of the musicians in any of these bands have any delusions that they are going to, be the next, Dee Snider or something and become, a household name and make millions of dollars and be rolling in hookers and cocaine, for the next 10 years until they find God or something like that, and then have to do the retro reunion tour. I think most of them are pretty well grounded in understanding, like, I'm doing this because I love this style of music and I want to have that, I want to do that, but I understand I'm not going to be signed. Somebody made the joke earlier that Epic Heavy Metal should be signed to Epic. They understand they're not going to get signed to Epic. They're not getting signed by, Time Warner or, anything like that. They're going to work at this level down here, but that lets them do it the way they want to. What happened to most metal bands when they got up to here to this level? They went to shit. They had labels pressuring them just to, do a bunch of, MTV cock rock, pop 40 hit shit. They had tons of hangers on leeching off of them all the time. They got distracted. Sometimes you had band members OD, die, get in serious accidents. Their traditional fan base, in a lot of cases, kind of drifted away from them because the music kind of went to crap.
And then they end up playing 20 years later at the farm at the fair next to the hog barn.
Yeah, exactly. If they even make it that
If they
far
make
along,
it that far, yeah.
Yeah, you had they tried one or two more albums that tanked because as soon as they weren't the flavor of the month, then they had nobody's attention. The bands in the new wave of traditional heavy metal don't have that concern. They're not going to get that big, so there's no pressure on Night Demon to write a song that's going to take over FM radio. There's no pressure on Traveler to try to make something that's going to completely dominate Spotify so that they can start selling out 60,000 seat venues on a 8-month world tour that's going to play 162 dates in 163 days. Those things are grinders, man. They pulverize those bands. They chew them up and spit them out. These bands, because of the level they're at, don't have those concerns. And that could actually be a good thing for them. They're not going to become millionaires from it, but they can, if they want to, just keep making the style of music they want to with very little pressure to change if they don't want to change. I don't know. Thoughts?
Agreed. Yeah.
That's much more succinct than I put it. Marty is good at taking it takes me 10 minutes to say. Marty can usually say in like 30 seconds, and it makes more sense.
You said it so eloquently. I have nothing more to add. I mean, really, Kellen does though. He's itching.
No, I mean, to follow the other point that because they don't have like you mentioned this in your video, aspirations for world conquest.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
No universe or dimension is it going to happen.
That it to some degree saves them and potentially whatever artistic integrity that they would hold on to as a consequence. Yeah, I mean, totally makes sense, and it's something that potentially the bands prior to them were. I mean, whether they enjoyed it at the time, but the same, 40 years later, suffer the consequences for.
You can't live at the top. You just can't. In any facet of life, you're not always going to be at the top. There's ebbs and flows to everything, and something as fragile as music, it's culture. It shifts with the times. It shifts with popularity. It shifts with, a new generation of people coming in with different ideas and experience behind them, how they hear music. You tune on the radio and hear songs like WAP or whatever else is. I mean, what sort of cultural significance and substance is in that? Seriously. What? I mean, what is that saying to anybody? It's just like garbage. It's just like a cheap bag of chips at the ghetto market. We go down here, we buy these off-brand Doritos, and they look like Doritos, they smell like Doritos, but they don't taste like Doritos. There's no substance. It's like, and any band like Cannibal Corpse, I mean, are they playing stadiums? No. They have played stadiums. They opened for Slayer. They've played stadiums. So they've been there. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here because
I'm just happy because based on your logic, it means that eventually Taylor Swift must go away.
I do not understand.
And that cannot happen soon enough.
Who gives a crap about that shit? And it's like everywhere I look, the internet, the social media, who cares? Oh my God, Taylor Swift had a successful shit today. News at 11. It was solid.
The entire NFL,
solid Browns,
which has more money than it needs anyway. It has this whole season of the NFL has now been completely bent around whether or not she shows up to watch her boyfriend play. It's like we're just constantly it's 4th and 1 with 3 seconds left, but is Taylor still up there watching?
Is she excited?
Oh wait, game's over. Sorry, we missed.
She even knows what's happening. No.
I don't care. It's just no. So bottom line, she must go by Marty's logic. Yeah, all things must pass, and that includes Taylor Swift.
Yep, and the skid mark she will leave on popular culture, infinitesimal. I promise. And I just want to say, I want to touch on what Ruthless Metal said here. They still call NWOTHM new wave of British heavy metal, and that stuff is 40 plus years. I mean, at some point, it's no longer factual or true. It just becomes what everybody recognizes as the term that describes a type of music. When you say new wave of British heavy metal, people know in their head what it is. That's forever. And I agree with you, Ruthless Metal. I mean, if we're going to keep everything current, we would have to update the genres all the time with anything that's got a new wave of. I mean, that's always going to have to change, and it's never going to change.
You don't, because and I disagree there a little bit, actually, because the new wave of British heavy metal ended. As a scene, it died, and it died pretty fast. So
it didn't last long. Yeah.
No, I mean, if you want to be extremely generous, you give it a 7-year time span from 1979 to 1986. And most people are not that generous. They're going to boil it down to about 80 to 84. Maybe you can argue for 85, but okay, you're talking like 5 years, and then that shit's over. Yes, some of those bands stuck around, like Cloven Hoof. The stuff they were doing in the late 80s was much more akin to traditional European types of power metal. It wasn't similar to what they were doing 5 or 10 years earlier. Do you still have some bands now that go back and again try to emulate new wave of British heavy metal sounds? Sure. Have a few of those bands kind of come back around. Yeah, Saxon's a great example of that. But look at all the shit Saxon did for decades in between. I'm saying shit just in a general term, not awful music.
A lot
By
of
84, 85, Saxon wasn't playing new wave of British heavy metal. They were, playing Crusader and Innocence Is No Excuse. They were doing very commercial.
And later on, they started adopting more power metal. They started to get a little bit more heavy, and
they've gone through a bunch of sounds before they kind of came back, in more recent years to their core traditional sound. It's one reason I'm not waving a Saxon CD around when I'm waving these around as the core sound. Saxon, I don't know if Saxon quite fits there because they were there before these bands, as starting out as with a lot of blues and boogie stuff in 79, and by the mid 80s they were way over on the more commercial side of things. So, but yeah, to get back to the term, the new wave of British heavy metal ended and went away. A few or stragglers here or there. This movement, new wave of traditional heavy metal, as Kellen said, it's kind of kept steadily growing, but it's done so for so long that it just feels very silly if a band comes out, with their first release tomorrow, and I call it new wave of traditional heavy metal. I'm putting in the same bin as, Portrait and In Solitude that put out their first album 15 or so years ago, which just feels weird.
And I will say, I've noticed this discussion tonight, and he explained why. But Kellen is a lot more generous in accepting all these other bands under the new wave of British or new wave of traditional heavy metal. Where I personally, I'm not feeling it. But again, it's all where you came from, and you're trying to. I get it.
And that was the point of the discussion.
Even though you're wrong, it's cool. We still love you. And
going back to opening comments, Kellen is doing the lumping thing and Marty's doing the splitting thing.
Yep.
And those are two approaches to classification in anywhere classifications come up. Sometimes you group a bunch of stuff into the same bin, and other people want to split them out into separate bins. It's different approaches. So
if you lump them, people won't understand. I mean, if you put what the hell is the Cathedral chick band?
Lucifer.
If you put Lucifer in with Riot City, say it's all new wave of traditional. It's that gives nobody any sort of. I know you didn't do that, but I'm just saying it doesn't give anybody any sort of. There's no litmus. You don't know where you're at.
It would give people a false impression of what.
Too broad of a term. It's too broad.
Be like, dude, I thought you said this was new wave of traditional metal. This sounds like some kind of 70s throwback shit.
Yeah,
it does. That's part of the new wave of traditional metal, isn't it? Not in my mind, it's not.
Wow, this Witch Weasel sounds a lot like something on classic rock radio. What are you talking about? New wave of traditional heavy metal.
We can come back to our closing comments this evening, and then get it back. We still have records to discuss.
Yeah, we do.
We do. I sidetracked us there for a bit. I do.
That's good. No, it was all relevant. And it was cool. A cool sidestep. And whose turn is it?
That's a great question.
I talked about Silver Talon. I think with Silver Talon. So
do you have one left in your stack?
I have one left in my stack.
Okay, then
why do I have two left in my stack?
Because it's my turn. I have two, and you have two.
Oh,
We're in the middle of the rotation.
We have no other
Still round
purpose.
four.
I'm the younger one with the memory. That
Well,
I
I've been
can help
drinking
you.
since 4:30 today, so forgive me.
Right.
All right.
All right.
Now that Marty is good and lubed up, we're going to give him a chance to really go off.
I'm hanging
here.
in there. I'm good. Everything's good. Everything's good.
Is spell good?
Alright.
Oh, God
Yeah,
damn it.
So yeah, my next, my fourth choice for this was Spells Opulent Decay. Spells, a Canadian band. This came out in 2020. This is not their first album. They had at least one or two before this, which I had heard some of and was really not impressed by. Again, this was a band that some people were kind of talking up. I checked them out on album number 2, I think. It's just like, it struck me just as very plain sounding. It's like, it's okay, but there's nothing special about it. Then this album came out and people were talking about it too. It's like, okay, I'll give them another chance. I only I played maybe half of the first album or whatever, didn't do it, but let's see what the new one's like. This one I really liked. It was very different to me. But what the heck is it? I have really struggled with where to put Spell on the shelves. Again, my shelves are kind of split up by some genres.
That's a tough one to classify.
Spell is a tough one to figure out what shelf to put on. Yeah, I will admit, and I think Marty's going to probably take this ball and run with it, and that's fine.
I'm gonna go pee while you guys talk because while I prepare myself.
He is already so angry he's about to micturate upon him. If this counts as metal, and I'm not 100% sure it does, it owes a lot to the kind of 70s. Again, it's in that 70s retro kind of thing where we put Lucifer, where we put the witch Hazel. That's probably where it should go. However, I don't know if it even fits there all that well. What I noticed listening to Spell on this album, and they've released another one since that is in the same vein, they have a lot of 80s music sounds from, again, maybe parts of post-punk, parts, even though of just, like the very kind of, bright, jangly guitars you would associate maybe with bands like, The Cure or Chameleons to an extent. They don't have a goth vibe to them at all, really, in my opinion. But yeah, there's a lot of 80s popular music kind of feel to the guitar tone, to the production. So it's kind of like one foot in the 70s, one foot in the early 80s. It makes for a very interesting combination of influences. And it's one of the reasons I like the albums a lot. The songs are pretty varied on the albums. It's not like every song is in that exact same cookie cutter mold. But yeah, in terms of a place to put it, there's no epic vibe here, in my opinion. I'm not putting it with that stuff. There's no doominess. Some of the songs have a sadness to them, but not every song. So not a doom thing. It's not a power metal thing whatsoever. We can't go in that direction. I'm left putting it somewhere in, maybe with the 70s retro metal thing, but it's got this big 80s, very bright, pretty sounding sheen to it at the same time. It doesn't have that, warm, fuzzy, earthy vibe we associate with a lot of 70s music. It sounds like an 80s album by a 70s band. I don't know what to do with this one. I kind of just eventually gave up and decided I will put it in that 70s metal hard rock category, and I'm not necessarily satisfied with that. So I'm very, very interested to hear how y'all kind of pick this one apart, because it's not an easy one for me, even though I really like the music they do. Let's let Kellen have first crack at this, so and then we'll let Marty erupt.
Kellen says this is a metal album. I'm flipping. Something is getting set on fire.
All right. Well, if you have a copy of what was it? Is it Dissection or well, I'm trying to think of the albums you've broken on camera.
Yeah.
No, so
record's hard to break, by the way. I did that. I'm like, I had to use all my big boy muscles, and then when it finally blew, I'm still picking shards out of this room. It's crazy.
I actually really agree here with Alan, for me, it's really like a band that sometimes gets grouped into this scene purely by country and label. And your influences, to me, it sounds like 70s prog and I 80s post-punk. That is what I hear on this record.
Post-punk, really?
I can see that with some of the guitar tones in particular.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Whereas you could hear, like on the In Solitude record, where they had moved from with something a bit more grounded in a metal release. Spell to me seems, if you're the lyrical content, the label that they're on, which is also Bad Omen, I believe. So where Witch Hazel is coming from.
That makes sense.
Right. But to me, there's
Bad Omen.
everything about this is like purely adjacent to what at some vague understanding metal is, that it seemingly disqualifies them from, in a lot of ways, what I would consider to be heavy metal. Like I agree with you. There's an interesting listen, but beyond that, I'd have a difficult time classifying them as anything metal. Right? It's more like 70s prog, but there's nothing to balance out that opposite side with it. Instead of stepping into something that's a bit more traditional heavy metal, it moves into kind of a post-punk thing. So I'm going to say this is a very interesting listen. They've been an album that came out last year that I think is also similar in terms of being well received. But an odd band that I think sometimes gets grouped in purely by association.
That's a good point. It could be. That definitely happens.
Okay.
All right, Marty, take the stage.
The thing that
the mic is yours.
The thing I'm realizing
Go ahead and start.
as we come to this point is I might be judging my venom or gauging my venom as my perception. Does the band here probably doesn't consider themselves a metal band? I went at this thinking initially that they did. Isn't one of the guys in another band like a metal band?
I will check.
But I guess what really is fueling this rage at this point is of all the other people I've seen online calling it so flippantly a metal record. And the type of people, I typed this to Kellen today earlier on.
They're both in a project called, or were in a project called Striker. One of them was also in Bloodstar, who did an album earlier this year.
Oh, that Bloodstar record's pretty good.
And to your follow-up, Reversed is like a death metal, black metal band from Canada that they're also in. So
yeah,
which is,
the type of people I've been seeing showing this on there. I'm generalizing and blowing it up because I was venting at the time I typed this. Handlebar mustache? Check. Brewing home brews out of a bucket that you also use as your compost toilet? Check. Known by the cashier at Goodwill on a first name basis? Check. And then I get to the record. I struggle with music like this. And I think it's because I don't know where to put it. It's interesting and endlessly talented. Don't get me wrong here. On the other hand, they're working overtime to not be pigeonholed, which annoys me. Is being called metal a bad thing these days? 70s influence, mild prog. I hear some hair metal, like some Rat guitar riffs on a couple tracks. Is it metal? The vocals are whiny. Ultimately, I dislike this a lot. This is the only album in this whole shebang we've done this evening. I don't know. I put venom on it. It made me angry. It annoyed me to listen to it. I don't want to listen to it again. And it's not because it sucks. It doesn't. It's really good. But if people call this new wave of traditional heavy metal, they are high. It's not metal at all. And Alan,
hey, don't talk about Ryan that way.
Right, soy lattes. It's fine. And again, this band probably doesn't consider. If I listen to this, they don't think they're metal. They think they're about as metal as Witch Hazel thinks they're metal. They're not. I don't like this. I don't like this genre. I just don't. If this is new wave of traditional heavy metal, I'm out. Seriously, I'm not interested at all. And I wish I could appreciate the talent and come back to it maybe at a later date. But, you know, I don't have to like everything. And I really don't like this. I really don't. It's my brain just doesn't know where to put it. I listen to it. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm listening to. I can hear all the notes and this and that. I look at the picture. I look at the cover. The cover's cool. No, not metal. Sorry, people. Not good. And if you know, I'm sure you're not using your compost bucket as your brewing bucket, but I think
we all agreed on this one, actually.
we kind of, yeah, we all like, yeah, it's probably,
I don't, the venom that you feel so passionately about, I don't necessarily share, but
it's just annoying to me. I don't know what it is. It's like and I listened to like the new Horrendous. It's good. No. They've like drifted so far away from, which is fine, but it's just like all these bands in two mold. It's like they're, I don't know.
Okay.
It's not the look. It's not the aesthetic. It's just, I'm listening to it. It's more prog than metal at this point. And maybe I'm mad because I can't come along for the journey. I can't be part of the cool guy club. That's part of it, but I listen to it and it just doesn't sit with me. It just doesn't sit. And that's fine. Anyway, who's next? Kellen.
You are, sir. You're fourth choice.
Shit, I was talking. I thought I was it. All right. So I have two more, right? Yeah.
You do.
Mm-hmm. This will be number 4 for you.
Number 4, we're going back to Greece. And a band that doesn't sound, again, very Greek. I picked Triumpher with Storming the Walls. This came out this year on Floga. What did I think of this? I got the wrong person up here. Silvertone. Oh, this is mine. Okay. Well-crafted speed metal with more triumphant power. Power metal melodies and guitar work. The album rips. I was really quite surprised. I was dinking around on Bandcamp is one of those services that everybody loves, everybody supports. I forget about it constantly. But then when I do, I go on and I start farting around, and this is one of the first things I picked up in the power metal. This was like in the power metal section, and it blew me away right away because it has a more of an aggressive speed metal. I don't know. What do you guys think? This isn't new wave traditional heavy metal for me. This is more speed metal with some power metal influence. Kellen?
Yeah, I agree. It's a tricky one for me to classify. Like for just personally, when I would listen to something like the Sacred Outcry, that one is clearly defined for me personally closer to the European school of power metal. This one's got a bit more aggression in it. So at times it reminds me of a power metal listen. But the riffing style, it even, I would say, pushes past speed metal. It's like almost like they're coming from like a black metal kind of thing. You look at the album cover, and I thought it was a black metal band, just like the logo and everything. Like, I was very caught off guard. Just the font that they chose, it just did not look like a speed metal or power metal. But what I would say though, just because once again I'm doing the grouping thing, the fact that it does not have the polish, enough of a polish to be a European power metal listen. It's probably closer, I think, sonically to a speed metal listen that has a vocalist that probably is a bit more polished than your speed metal vocalist, and thematically, lyrically, it's closer to a power metal listen. Like, I probably would see it lumped in with this movement for sure.
Really? Okay. Alan, what do you think?
I had a very different experience with this album than you do, it seems. I'm honestly wondering if I listened to the same album or something, but I'm pretty sure I did because I've revisited this album a couple of times this year. It's gotten a good amount of chatter throughout the year from different people. It doesn't strike me as speed metal. I don't think it's nearly fast enough for me to want to call it speed metal at all. I do agree with Kellen that, yes, it's got a bit of a rougher sound to it. It definitely doesn't have the polish of a power metal project, certainly not the European flavor of power metal. The thing that stood out to me here was that, at first I started hearing just like, this is actually leaning in like an older Manowar direction.
What?
The vocalist to me sounds like Eric Adams if he was like, really drunk and hungover, and his never do well brother-in-law showed up and was wanting to borrow money. So like, fuck you, we're gonna take care of that shit. Yeah, I got those kind of vibes from it a bit more. And again, Mal, maybe some parts are kind of fast, some parts are not, and some of those sections again, it made me think this feels like they were kind of wanting to take earlier Manowar, but yeah, make it a little more aggressive. Now, aggressive is a decent word to apply, but I wouldn't apply speed in terms of the aggression. So yeah, I get sort of like the hulking, ugly version of an older Manowar. That's they stopped pumping weights to bulk up and started taking their vitamins, as we've discussed. Yeah, I got a little too angry about it all. It's not bad. It kind of works. It may sound like I'm describing it in a cartoonish way, which is not my intention. It actually works pretty good overall. In terms of where I would put it, yeah, I've got no problem with this being new wave of traditional heavy metal at all. I don't see the speed category coming into play here at all. Again, it's rough enough around the edges that maybe some hints of that, epic stuff, but I certainly wouldn't call it an epic metal release. Doesn't have, the doom flavorings to it at all. It's just, it's got a good traditional metal structure to it, and it's kind of rough around the edges. And I think that kind of plays to its favor, gives it a certain charm. So yeah, I'll put it there in new wave of traditional heavy metal, where Kellen's got it.
Right on. Okay. Kind of a surprise, but cool. All right.
Yeah. I'm going to go back and play it again because maybe I just blatantly missed. Maybe YouTube cycled to a different album and I wasn't paying attention or something. Cause yeah, the
God, I don't remember the
really
Manowar worship. Everybody else is saying it too. Maybe I need to listen to it again. But did you hear the speed metal on it, Kellen?
Would you say at least, Alan, it's a faster record than a Manowar record?
It's way faster.
Yes. Now it does not.
More
It's
aggressive
not an
vocals at
right
times, too.
past.
Yeah.
Press,
because I'm sort of seeing similarities, like the vocal style to it very much leans toward the Manowar for me. Mm-hmm. It is a bit more on like a traditional epic side of things, but I agree with Marty that the pacing to this, it was important to the experience. There's
speed to it.
It's a faster record. To the opening track, you get these big sort of triumphant soaring vocals, right, where he's like just forcing his way through the song. I was actually surprised sometimes. The drunken Eric Adams, like I was like, please hit this note. I think you're gonna hit this note.
yeah. Like, is this gonna work? I don't know.
Yes, he's really reaching. But so that kind of like gruff vocal style, I think, works well for epic heavy metal. But it is a faster release, like riffing style, than I'm usually hearing from an epic heavy metal album, and that was just something I came away with for sure. That's
a good point, and that's maybe one of the things that really keeps it out of that epic lane, because as we've been talking, the epic albums, they may have a faster song on them here or there, but it's certainly not a central component of the albums overall. You can have Necropolis be really fast, but the rest of that album is not very fast for Crystal Logic.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting takes on that one.
Oh, yeah,
it was a good pick, Marty. I'm glad you picked it.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Last round.
Kellen.
Okay. So this is another one of my take it or leave it, but it really wanted to drive home a conversation about how lines have shifted over the years. So this is Malokarpatan. Kripsky One. I'm sure I'm crushing that, but
nailed it.
Yeah,
Kripinska Ona, I would say, but hard to say.
See, there we go. That's such a cultured man there. Thank you.
Oh, look at me.
But
from Twisted Tea to White Claw, I'm here for you, buddy.
A band for me that starts in first wave black metal, like especially their first couple records are clearly more aggressive, pulling from like the Venom and Merciful Fate catalog. Then I think what's really interesting by the time you get to this release, and for those who haven't not heard their brand new one, speaking of a band that also didn't receive a lot of attention, like Root is another band that I think for the years did not get a lot of attention.
Root always reminded me it should be the other way around, but I hear a lot of Moonspell in Root.
Right. I totally see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Anyway.
But like a part of, that Eastern European kind of black metal was playing by a different set of rules. So we think about like how perception of what Merciful Fate and Venom have shifted through the years to bands that are undiscovered that have also played a role in terms of introducing more sort of an epic heavy metal side of things, right? Like Bathory and Root, I think, share a similar history, but they're fundamentally different bands. To a record here where they're also introducing their own sort of Slavic folklore. They're a totally unique project, and I can't deny the fact that there are the black metal but heavy metal riffing style here.
There is some heavy metal in that, I would say.
Is inescapable to me. And
especially on the new album. Man, that new album. Wow. I need to get it. It's so good. It's so good.
It dips deeper into like 70s prog.
But it's still very Master's Hammer at its core. It's got the first wave vibe,
Right. And an important influence, right? They really expanded their sound.
I'll be back in a second, guys.
Yep.
I could understand for someone that this does not fit into a traditional heavy metal listen.
No, not for me.
Right. But at the same time, it's very difficult for me to turn off the side of my brain that hears the heavy metal on this.
It's definitely there. I think Ben nailed it by saying some Judas Priest riffs every once in a while, and it's there. It's there.
So it's a band that you kind of keep an eye on, because I think people are willing at least to accept their contradictions and the different subgenres they navigate, and in some way that we wouldn't with other bands. And I'm in terms of where we talk about how things change over the years, I wonder what their perception will be in a few decades.
Right.
How we will view them in the context of the bands that they sort of came around, and it can, as the sort of lines shift in 20 years of how we understand Merciful Fate and Venom, the kind of consequence that'll have on a band like this. So if it doesn't fit under new wave traditional heavy metal, I totally get it. But this definitely has an appeal, I think, for someone who's potentially, if you're listening to Portrait, I would have no hesitation bringing this band to you and playing it for you. It's going to sound very different. The vocals are going to push you somewhere potentially unfamiliar, primarily. But I think there's enough heavy metal on this record to make it a compelling contribution, at least to the conversation.
Right on. Alan, you want me to go next? You good? Or you want me to go? Okay. I don't hear the new wave of traditional heavy metal on this. Master's Hammer inspired first wave black metal with mild classic heavy metal influence, like Kellen so eloquently stated. And I would say I really liked this album when I heard it, got it. And then I harvested the clips for the review that Ben did on Heavy Metallurgy. Go check out that review. And I was pretty enamored by. It's quite impressive between this album and the new album, the rate of development. It's a huge jump in quality, not only sound wise, but composition. They've got a lot braver. They're incorporating more weird synth and traditional instruments, yet maintaining that harsh Master's Hammer type vocal style. It's very Slavic, very weird and kind of twisted. The new album is really good, and this one is good too, but I can't go new wave of traditional heavy metal. It's always going to be first wave inspired. Yes, clearly some heavy metal riffs on here for sure. for sure. And I can see why you want to push it there, but I think with that vocal style and overall vibe, it's hard to get there. It's hard to get there for me. Alan? Sorry.
Sorry, I just had to grab a quick snack. I usually
Right
do
on.
before we start. And
Man, I've been sitting here thinking about Burger King, but yeah, not gonna happen.
Yep. Yeah, I'd agree with y'all overall here. Wasn't familiar with this band at all until the past couple of months, where Kellen had chosen this one to listen to, and then pretty soon after that, the new album dropped, and so I was like, oh, this is the band Kellen is on his list, so let's listen to both of these, which probably wasn't a great idea. I think it's kind of split my attention trying to introduce myself to the band through 2 albums at once. I am bad to do that sometimes. But yeah, interesting sound, very neat, kind of original. You don't hear a lot of bands, take that harsher vocal approach and graft it, to a more, kind of, traditional metal underpinnings the way they do, which y'all have described just fine. So yeah, shortcuts here. I would not call it new wave of traditional heavy metal either, because for the simple reason, I think this band is doing something that's relatively unique. And so
yeah, we can also say, is new traditional heavy metal, is it unique? No, not usually. Anyway, go ahead.
No, and again, it's one of those gradational things. I mean, every band is a little different from every other band. Yes, it's like everyone's different and special in their own way. But I mean, the focus for a lot of new wave of traditional heavy metal, I mean, it's right there in the name. It was meant to be a return to the traditional sound. Malokarpatan's doing something that's very different from the traditional sounds. There may be some callbacks to like first wave black metal, as Kellen said, but it's only like one component. They're not trying to sound like that, at least not on this album. Now maybe they did on their first couple that you mentioned, Kellen. I have not heard those, but by this point, they're taking that one component maybe from the black metal style, and they're definitely combining these pieces in some new, unusual, and interesting ways. So yeah, seems like a neat band. I need to spend some more time with them. I liked Ben's review a lot. I haven't sat and played the new album enough to digest it, to have any deep thoughts on it. But yeah, interesting project for sure. But I think what they're doing is, they're over here in their own little genre. So we're not even going to worry about what to call that. We're just going to say it's not new wave of traditional heavy metal and leave it there.
Right on. Alan, you're up.
I am up. So my fifth and last one, band that I have pretty sure I discussed them at one point or another. I'm bound to have brought them up at least once. It's Atlantean Codex from Germany. I chose their second album, The White Goddess. We've talked about Course of Empire a lot. Haven't talked about their other ones as much, so that was part of my reasoning for going with this album in particular. Reason I picked them is this is another band I've always had trouble figuring out what shelf they're supposed to be on. They showed up in the timeline right when new wave of traditional heavy metal was coalescing, in that mid 2000s period. So the timing here would be just right for them to be put into that category. One of their first vinyl appearances, was the split, German-Swedish compilation album. They're on that same compilation with bands like In Solitude and Enforcer. I don't remember the full lineup off the top of my head, but a lot of the bands on that comp are, some of your poster children for new wave of traditional heavy metal. All of that said, I've never really thought of Atlantean Codex as part of that style. But, trying to pick it apart more for this particular topic. When people ask me, what does Atlantean Codex sound like? I've introduced Marty to the band, had to describe it to him. Introduced Mike Seatown to the band, had to, he's like, okay, what do they sound like? Again, it's that question we all have to answer. My response is usually boils down to something like, well, start with early Manowar and Hammerheart era Bathory, make them have a beautiful child together, but make it more doomy.
They're way better than both of those bands. They're just so much more complex, layered,
They again, that's
cerebral. I mean, all of it.
Yes, they for me they check all the boxes, but I'm going to try not to just drool over them here and stick to the genre things. They are epic on a scale that very few bands get this epic.
They can't even comprehend.
They are maxing out the epic lever on the control panel. They have a very strong doom component for me on a lot of their music. They really, a lot of the songs are pretty slow to mid pace. They are very heavy in the riff department. They can be, crushingly heavy, but it's a very clean kind of sound. It's not the same kind of doom that we started with tonight on like Minator, where it's got, that kind of dirty Hellhammer vibe to it. No, this is getting maybe a little bit more even towards the Candlemass kind of, it's big and heavy, but it's got this big full sound at the same time. But it also does have, traditional metal structures built in there. The faster songs, they know how to gallop. They know how to, break out the guitar heroics a bit. When it's time to solo, they can crank out some headbanging numbers at the same time that they're doing these slow giant epics too. Sorry, go ahead, Marty.
I would interject Candlemass at the Nightfall era to be in particular. It's not just the boring power chords. It's the layers, the Gregorian, the whole atmosphere of Nightfall.
Yep. Yeah. All that boils in here. So
sorry.
No. That's a good clarification. Thank you. So where did I end up boiling this down to for genre? I've been pretty consistent on this pattern tonight. I'm still not. I'm actually going to turn things around a little bit on this one. For me, Atlantean Codex has enough of the doom metal vibe and pacings, and sound. Rather than call this like doomy epic metal like I've done for Kirith Ungol and such, I actually want to call this one epic doom metal, which I do see, used as a subgenre tag, here and there. I think at the core, I think doom has a bigger place at the core of this band's sound. But, it has to be qualified with the epic nature of the music, too. Could I call it doomy epic metal and be content? It might work, but I think there's a distinction here between this band and who else have we put in that tag tonight? The Kirith Ungols.
Would you put it with Doomsword?
The Doomsword. Again, Doomsword doesn't have that much doom in them, which is ironic.
And Atlantean Codex shits on both of those bands. If you're going to put them in the same category, Atlantean Codex snakes devil coils on them all day long.
They might indeed. But I think they do have to. I think this has to shift into a little different lane. And I want to call them an epic doom band and leave them there. I can see people classifying this very differently, though. So I want to know where y'all are trying to pigeonhole it. I've always had trouble nailing this one down as much as I love them. So, Kellen?
Yeah, definitely fall in my grouping category for tonight. I would go this is one of the most important bands that we've talked about in terms of their contribution.
They're so fucking good.
I saved it to the end for
right.
For
over. I mean, we're mid 2000s. I think the first album's in 2008. I could be wrong.
I believe that's right. If not, it's within a year.
But you're right. Like we have early demos going back, before that. So, I really I would just agree with all the qualifications you made in terms of the sound. It is to Marty's point about I would not talk about the shitting coils all over.
Snaking. I said I'm more classy than shitting. I said snaking
coils. But I do think it to talk about a progression of epic doom, Candlemass may be like the root element to this band, but I think they take that Man-O-War and Bathory side through Doomsword to arrive at their sound. And there's just so much more sophistication and intricacy. Part of the appeal for me with Doomsword is its like raw, kind of gruff nature. Atlantean Codex is a far more complex, ornate kind of band. So their vocalist also is a totally different animal by comparison to Doomsword.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more traditional sort of vocal style in his voice.
Yes, and you've pointed out, I know, in conversations before, it's a little unusual that, he has such a clean singing style when we think of a lot of the characters in these genres as, having these more outrageous, distinct voices.
Yeah, I know. You can
and
tell.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
He's trained. He's got those little runs in him.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But I can't echo enough in terms of song construction. I think it's the first sort of attribute that I would contribute with this band is that there's so much going on. Lyrically, you can tell they're spending a lot of time to work out sort of concepts. So similar to the Malokarpatan release, where they're doing something very original and it's worth your time to seek them out. I would group them in with that. To me, yes, they are part of one of the most important bands to emerge from the new wave of traditional heavy metal. But if you're going to ask me what genre they belong in, it's epic doom.
Yeah. I got to thank again. I mean, Alan's turned me on to a lot of great stuff over the years, but man, this Atlantean Codex was the one that's really been the biggest impact. The first time I heard He Who Walks Behind the Ears off A Course of Empire, which is the first album I got from them, brought me to tears. That song is amazing. And the only thing I wrote for this is epic heavy metal, true to the core, with songcraft so utterly complex and deep, it's hard to separate the music from the journey it takes us on. And you mentioned Man-O-War, you mentioned, Bathory, you mentioned, I don't know who else you mentioned, but Candlemass. All these bands are good in their own right, but Atlantean Codex has got more layering and it's more of I say cerebral. It is more of a cerebral trip. There's more layering going on. There's some awesome melody lines. Like I said, it's world building music. I have a hard time calling it doom because to me, doom in my head, I do like doom, but it's down here for me. It's often doom is often not explored to its maximum potential. I think if you play slow, you play power chords, you're called a doom band, people dig it. Yeah, sure. But Atlantean Codex takes that parameter and it builds a mansion on top of a pretty rickety foundation and makes it amazing. I don't know. It's just fantastic band. I can never describe them better than Alan on this situation. Like I said, he turned me on to it. And in the White Goddess, I have not heard this record until this. That's the only one of theirs I don't own at this point. I'm going to get it, but I haven't got it yet. But wow. But not new wave of traditional heavy metal. Sorry. It's epic to me. This is epic. I don't even consider this as doom. I think it's transcended doom. Doom to me is great, but it's just not. It's often not as good as it could be. Bands like Evoken do a good job. They're like one of the top of the list, but Atlantean Codex, if they're a doom band, they're the end boss for me.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Doom metal, the B- student of the heavy metal underground.
It kind of is. It really is.
You're doing okay, but you could have done better.
I mean, you listen to Thurgathon, or you listen to.
Well, that's funeral doom. Now that's a.
Funeral doom is like taking the. It's underachieving. It's underachieving.
You heard it here first, folks.
B-.
Funeral doom, the C-.
But you listen to bands like Disembowelment, who took it and did something amazing with it. They took doom, They added grind elements. They added all this weird world music and ethereal atmosphere to, you know, transcends into the peripheral. Wow. Good luck, Thurgathon. Good luck, whoever else topping that, you know. Anyway, sorry.
It's all good. You've got one last record to share, and I think it's one people have been waiting for tonight, Marty.
Right on. Where's my paper? Is this mine? No. Nope, this is mine. Okay. Well, me and Kellen, again, we talked about this on his channel. Megaton Sword. Might and Power. The latest album by them came out this year. Probably going to be on my year-end list. To me, this is epic, though they're moving away from epic. This is a lot. This is kind of a change from their last album. A band seemingly driven by the expansive range of their vocalist. And his range is starting to move into territories that are not necessarily metal to me. Distortion is a bit thinner on this record. There's more gentle / clean musical movement. More rock influence at times. The next album, maybe even less metal. I mean, we'll see. But I mean, this is still a metal record to me. But they're just clinging on to the epic tag for me. The last album, Flame Hail Steel, Steel Hails Fire. Is that the name of it?
Blood Hail Steel.
Blood Hail Steel, Steel Hails Fire.
There's some blood in there somewhere.
Yep, that's the first album I ever heard, and the first song on that album, the title track, one of their best songs they've ever done. It's an amazing. The rest of the album does not reach that pinnacle. That song's amazing. There'll always be an epic man to me because of that album. This here's a moving away. I think I said a million times in our stream, Kellen, that there's parts I hear that remind me of Greta Von Fleet, which people will be like, ugh. But this album took me a long time to process and get used to and end up loving. It's a great record. There's a lot of emotion on here. It's still metal. They still cling to metal. I will say this band is driven by their great vocalist. I like the riffs and the songs that are being written, but the solo, their lead guitarist sucks. He's not a good lead player. I've watched some live stuff with them, and his leads are not good. I could play those leads, and I'm not a good lead player. I'm not a lead player. And yeah, anyway, what do you guys think? We'll start with you, Alan.
Oh yeah, pretty similar take overall on it. The album starts pretty good. Yeah, the first few songs, yeah, that's where I'm picking up, some of those kind of leftover epic vibes from the previous album. The Raving Light of Day's got, good little gallop thing going on with it and such. Iron Plains also, still has that vibe. But yeah, you get deeper into the album and you definitely feel like you're drifting away from that. So yeah, not as epic as it was. And yeah, this one I think, yeah, still metal. That's fine. I would put it in new wave of traditional heavy metal. I've got no problem with it falling there. But yeah, it will be interesting to see what the band's trajectory is long term, if they really just kind of drift out of the metal sounds and head into other territories.
It really seems that's where they're heading to me.
It could be. It's maybe too early to tell. We don't have a lot of data points to define that trajectory just yet, but it could be. I'm not as high on this band as you and Kellen are, and that's okay. We've been down that road and had that conversation before, but it's certainly not a bad album. It's got a few good songs on it that I like. But I can, this one at least, I think, yes, they're still in the new wave of traditional heavy metal camp for now. This particular album still works there. All right, so then we'll let Kellen wrap this one up.
Yep, I mean, I would even go so. This might be just comfortable at this point being a traditional heavy metal record. The epic side, if on this album in particular, feels slightly downplayed relative to the previous one. So, I think they have enough of an influence, but even then, like on their previous record, they don't like. The title track is the most epic on the
good song.
There's a simplicity to their songs, which is something that we've talked about tonight in terms of defining characteristics for the genre epic, there's a certain kind of like narrative quality that they need to have. And I think part of the beauty of this band is like the simplicity of them. So I completely agree. It's driven by the vocal performance.
Yep.
Either you're on board with the vocals and you love it, or you're not on board and you can take it or leave it.
He's the best point of the band. He is the most focal point of the band.
For sure. For sure. So yeah, to me, by all means, part of the new wave of heavy metal. And maybe out of all the bands we've talked about tonight, like one that cleanly fits in the way that a lot of them haven't. I'm trying to think of the other examples, but there's been plenty of debate and disagreement. I think we're all sort of like landing on an agreed station for this particular band.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe on this one, I can agree that it's new wave of traditional heavy. The last album, I would have easily gone epic. And I'm just clinging to that because of that one song. So, I mean, I think they've maybe moved beyond, or it could be not into the traditional sense of what I think of it, like, the Judas Priest worshiping bands,
Right,
but
right.
it's definitely, I think they've changed enough to maybe crack into that mold a little bit. We'll see. Right on.
And
Wow.
then they were done.
I mean, we almost hit 100 tonight, and it's good to see all you folks in here still hanging with us. It's been a chatty, deep kind of conversation. Alan reminded us all that we're getting old and terribly decrepit, and some of this stuff is 30 years old and 40 years old. And thanks.
Got your back, man.
Yeah, thanks.
No, Kellen, thanks for helping kind of sculpt together what was a really interesting topic. Got to check out a lot of bands I was not familiar with, a lot of albums I'd never, and some of these I had seen but just never got around to checking out. So yeah, you've got different perspectives on a lot of different albums. That was pretty cool. And yes, a big thank you to the chat. There's been a lot of good conversations there about other albums and different bands that we didn't get to talk to tonight. Folks have been talking about Solstice from the UK in more detail. I think Rick brought up Pagan Altar, tons and tons of others that could have been part of this conversation that we just didn't get included this go around. But yeah, it's been an interesting topic, and very cool to hear everybody's different viewpoints on how these albums are. And we've seen some very different takes on it. And again, at the end of it, there's not a right or wrong way of doing it. It's not my fault that Kellen doesn't know how to split things out into their own genres. It's not my fault from his perspective. It's not my fault that I can't say they should all just be in the exact same thing, and why the hell do I keep trying to put them in different baskets when they should just be in the same basket? It's just different ways of classifying things, whether you're talking about heavy metal bands or zoological specimens or weird different types of apples at the farmer's market. Some people have 18 different freaking kinds of apples for sale. I look at them as like, there's red and there's yellow and green. That's all I need to know. Which color is the apple? There are 3 types of apples. I'm like, no. There's all these other things. Just give me a yellow one. That's all I need to know. When it comes to apples, I lump.
And I gotta say, Scott wins the chat tonight with this comment. Wife made me pick up a box of Atlantean Codex for her. I asked what aisle. Clerk said you'll find it in aisle B-. Thank you for that. That's rules. Best chat comment all night. Oh wait. Alan, what is the verdict on Kellen's Sirith flag? Keep or reap?
Oh, he can certainly keep that. That's an awesome flag.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say is so. Thank you for humoring me on this topic. And
I'm glad it all got ironed out, because people in the chat, there was a part in this discussion when they were coming up with this. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I'm just like, why am I here? Why am I in this discussion? Because it seemed way more convoluted and complex than it ended up being. And it ended up being an excellent discussion.
Well, I just want to say, there's a lot of online content for bands like this. But it's primarily coming from people who are trying to promote it. And I don't see a lot of pushback or people trying to interrogate it. So it was interesting. Like, I was excited to bring it to both of you tonight, because I knew you were going to be able to sort of offer a different interpretation of it in a way that I don't think is done a lot on YouTube or on online blogs or reviews. So I've done a lot to sort of highlight and praise the bands, which by all means, like, go for it. But I just think there was a disconnect, I personally, between the content that I'm consuming versus people who are potentially challenging or willing to challenge a lot of the things that people are talking about. They aren't talking to one another. So this was an opportunity for me to sort of like float these ideas to both of you tonight, and you know, kind of go through this, get your feedback, how you hear it, what you hear, and it's a differing opinion, you know. So I appreciate, you know, giving me the opportunity to bring them to you.
Good deal. Yes, it was a good topic, and yeah, I think we got some good different perspectives on it. See, Marty, as we wrap this up, show notes for next week that you'd like to let folks know about.
Yeah, the album club. There's going to be a review up Monday. It's probably going to be Melanie. I was trying to get something done, but it's not going to happen. So it's going to be Melanie Fuming Mouth. And Wednesday, the album club will be talking about Motorhead's Another Perfect Day LP, one of my favorite Motorhead records for its uniqueness. And yeah, Thin Lizzy influence. I like this, but Witch Hazel, leave the hall.
There's Another Perfect Day metal.
No, it's not. It's not. Not even 100. Not even a little bit. But anyway, next week, the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday. Alan's got stuff going on, so it's going to be me and maybe some other people. I don't know yet. You'll know when I know. But cheers. Anybody have anything to add? Oh, Kellen, thank you for all your work on the promos. Dude, they're funny and awesome, and it was very cool. And of course, Alan, if you run into Bulk Rogan somewhere, you know, give him a what's up from the Heavy Metallurgy crew. And
Kellen, he's still looking for you, so just you may want to keep kind of a low profile.
I don't think when we go through what you've been spinning, I will ever do that again without keeping one eye open for the appearance.
Oh my God, your reaction during that whole thing was, I showed my wife and she's like, oh my God, it's so funny. Your reaction, you're like, what is happening? So good. But anyway, everybody in the chat, you all rule. We appreciate you. Everybody that contributed. Thank you. You're great.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next week. As always, we're here for you. Cheers.
Until next time, keep it heavy.
Go to Killing for Company. Subscribe, damn it. And there's like 30% of you people that are watching that aren't subscribed. Come on. Click the subscribe. It helps. We're getting there. See ya.